Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic story part 3. The fanfic title is What If Naruto Inherited the Forgotten Uzumaki Overlord Legacy part 3. If you like this fanfic, don't forget to subscribe my channel. Now let's start the fanfics. Zabuza had a blank look in his eyes as he looked at the newly arrived team. Where the did you come from? Tumbled out of his lips. Shino merely pointed upward, where there was only a clear blue sky. Sasuke looked at the sky, then at Team 8, then back at the sky, before uttering a surprised, "What the swag?" was Shino's only answer. That's when Zabuza decided he had enough of this nonsense and charged. Immediately, he was intercepted by the two Jonin, with Anko blocking his mighty sword with her paddle and Kakashi jump kicking at his head. Zabuza looked at the paddle with wide eyes before dodging the kick, resulting in yet another falcon paddle to the rear. Flipping in mid-air, he landed on his feet and looked at the two Jonin in disbelief. A wooden paddle was not supposed to be able to hold off the Kubikiribocho. People were not supposed to appear out of nowhere. And most importantly, a young teen was not, under any circumstances, supposed to be floating a few centimeters above ground with her hair dancing in a non-existent wind, ethereal flames spinning around her and generating killing intent absolutely off the charts. He knew that Konoha had a reputation for producing insane and powerful ninja, but that was seriously pushing it. At least they respected the laws of physics before. Anko smirked idly, twirling her wooden paddle in her hand and pointing it at Zabuza menacingly. "Show me your moves, Cupcake," she yelled with a taunting smile. Meanwhile, Kakashi has somehow summoned a tribunal, and was sitting as the judge, in ceremonial robes. Case 22-369, Momochi Zabuza. The charges are as follow. Attack on Ika transporting device, destruction of said device, destruction of the holy Ika it contained, slaughter of Ika spreading personnel, blasphemy, and blatant lack of eyebrows. What do you plead, Zabuza-san? Wh. Are you talking about that book wagon I destroyed a few years back? He asked in astonishment. Could the day really get weirder? Guilty it is. Very well, the court condemn you too. Wait a moment please. Let it be known that karma wasn't the only immaterial entity prancing around the elemental nations, there was also its cousin, Murphy. Murphy was one mischievous fellow, always answering when called. Sadly, he considered he was called when someone said that a situation couldn't get worse or something like that, and Zabuza's question was an invitation in its incorporeal eyes, so. Kakashi blinked while looking at the ghostly entity standing before him. The only ones that didn't seem troubled were Team 8. The man-ghost was tall, had a small brown beard, large brown robes incredibly similar to those worn by Shino and Kiba, and was blue-tinted and somewhat transparent. Yes sir, I am Obaswag Kenobi, and I demand that the charges of unswaginess and lack of drive be added. And I also demand to be told what Ika is because it sounds like fun. Very well, the charges of unswaginess and lack of drive are added to the case. In light of it all, the court condemns Momochi Zabuza to death with ridiculously high prejudice. The tribunal disappeared in a puff of smoke. Kakashi made a clone that began to explain to Obaswag the glory of Ika, and Zabuza was once again attacked. With a very unmanly yelp, the swordsman dived to the side as the paddle flew through the place he had been in, before ducking again as the wooden tool came back, once again giving a large finger to the laws of physics. Kakashi used this distraction to close in and engage Zabuza in close combat with his abnormally sharp tanto, while Yakumo summoned an army of sentient and carnivorous Ika to bestow holy retribution upon the unbeliever. Hinata, who had gathered that Zabuza had destroyed a cart of Ika, decided that now was a good time to let her bow sing a song of fury and blood, and thus let loose a flurry of arrows that all came dangerously close to piercing one of Zabuza's tenketsu while presenting absolutely no danger to Kakashi. Hard-pressed as he was, Zabuza was forced to scramble away and summon a bunch of water clones to fend off Yakumo's ferocious books. That's when he heard the horn. A piece of the ground suddenly upturned, revealing a brownish light coming from it, and from the inside of this unexpected pit, a horde of small, brown creatures crawled, babbling and giggling, laughing and screaming, dressed in rabbit pelts and wolf fur, white hair and kitchen pots. They hardly looked fearsome, but they were many. Easily above 200, most of them only equipped with clubs. Naruto lowered his fist, and with a cry, charged along with his minions. Zabuza, trapped in all this chaos, felt true fear for the first time in years. He had only faced a few Konoha ninja, and most of them were the rank and file, sane type. These guys were obviously insane, and at a whole different level. For Kami's sake, the laws of physics were a joke to them. Since when could wooden paddles catch fire only when delivering a hit? Wait, what? Gah, thunk. Once again, Anko's ferocious falcon paddle sent Zabuza flying away and into a tree. As he climbed back to his feet, he was horrified to see that he was surrounded. Kakashi was in front of him, the paddle user just behind him, apparently charging an attack. The horde of brown imps were on his right with the armored kid at their head. The carnivorous porn books were on his left with the creepy girl leading them. The third Jonin was behind him with her two sword-wielding students, and the archer was aiming at his privates from a tree behind the imps. He was so screwed. I guess we can't talk about it. His answer came in the form of a viciously smirking Anko. Falcon style. Paddle fury. A combo counter appeared in the right corner of the screen and the background turned dark as Anko flashed behind Zabuza, leaving a trail of fire in her wake, and slamming her paddle with devastating force on Zabuza's butt cheeks once for each, before spinning on her heels, and dealing 4 more hits with her paddle, bringing the counter at 6. Spreading slightly her feet for a better balance, Anko spanned the paddle around her fingers using her chakra, hitting Zabuza's rear at high speed and bringing the combo at no less than 58. Under the strain of the ult, Zabuza flew into the air, his face an expression of unfathomable pain, but Anko wasn't finished. Jumping after her victim, Anko gathered energy in her paddle, leaving a trail of fire in its wake, and creating a small star on it. Just as she was beneath Zabuza, she lunged. As the paddle was about to make contact with Zabuza's abused behind, time slowed to a crawl as the star compressed slowly, before exploding violently. Falcon style. Nova paddle. With much smoke and over-the-top pyrotechnics, Zabuza disappeared into the sky, leaving only a pinging star in the blue sky and a cry of, Zabuza's blasting off again. Anko fell down to her feet, juggling her paddle tauntingly while the victory music played. Sasuke, Sakura and Tazuna could only look in bewilderment, their jaws getting to know the ground. Well, that went well, said Kakashi lightly with an eye smile, Anko nodding in agreement. Shino, with an artistic twirl of his sword, retracted the blade and put the handle to his waist, calmly making his way to his ghostly sensei, who was currently eating ghostly popcorn. Was my performance to your satisfaction, sensei? Well, you didn't do much, but you did it with style, so yeah. But I think you'll have to work a bit more with your Padawan, he still has a shaky grip on the swag. And indeed, Kiba's twirl was far less gracious and beautiful than Shino's. The young Aburame nodded, there would be much work. However, Hinata noticed a little something. Wait, I thought the junk food summoning contract was a Hyuga property. Oh, that. Yeah, I gave the contract to the Hyuga, no reason to let it spoil away while I was dead. Oh, that explains a lot, said Hinata in understanding, just before Yakumo appeared in front of her with a big, eager smile. It's you, isn't it? You're the one that brought the book to me, she said with a very happy smile. Hinata blinked before an expression of realization appeared on her face. You're the girl the Kurama trapped in that room. Yes, it was me. I can't imagine a fate worse than being trapped in a room with nothing good to re-HMMPH. Hinata's compionate speech was interrupted by Yakumo kissing her senseless, causing Naruto a nosebleed, especially since Hinata began kissing back after sending a glance his way. Oh, he loved his life. When the two girls finally separated for air, Yakumo had a shit-eating grin. Oh, the Aika Aika reenactment will be so fun. Aika Aika reenactment. said Hinata, perking up. She turned to Naruto. Were you aware of that Naru-kun? Wait, you're Naruto's fiancé? Asked Yakumo as her grin threatened to split her face. Even better. We can start soon. He said we could once you arrived. Hinata sent an appreciative smile to her fiancé as he removed his mempo. Said blonde had the smile of the century on his face. I'm a lucky bastard, he said happily. Then, both he and Hinata used the outfit switching scroll and changed into their kimono. As soon as the smoke had dispersed, Yakumo began to shamelessly ogle the couple. Alright, keep your pants on, lover girl, we need to get the client home, said Anko. However, you're free to jump them once we're on safe grounds. Yakumo grinned lecherously. Her program once they were safe was pretty obvious to everyone. Zabuza was, to put it shortly, in pain. The fact that his defeat had been administered in such an embering way did not help. I mean, he had been spanked into submission, and thrown through the airs. And finally, he had crashed face first in the forest, making a crater and placing him in a quite undignified position with his flaming behind up in the air. Thankfully, his tool, slave, and officially adopted daughter found that now was a good moment to deliver a cool wind to his abused buttocks, numbing the pain. Kami be thanked for Hyoten. As she helped him stand and tied something around his waist to avoid further humiliation through exposure of his cherry red rear end, Haku tried to rein in her shock. Zabuza-sama, how could they have beaten you so easily? She asked in fear. Simple Haku, they are how the elite kind of ninja Konoha can produce. The elite kind. Yeah, the ones so insane that even nature gives up on containing. He looked at his daughter and saw her blinking owlishly at him, quite visibly not understanding what he meant while she helped him to limp to their hideout. Remember that saying, there are things that everyone knows are impossible to do, then someone comes that doesn't know and do the thing. Well, these guys know it's impossible and do it anyway. The reason why Konoha is so strong and has won every single war it has been in is because reality has a very loose grip on their top shinobi. Don't you mean their top shinobi have? No, and that's the problem. And it was like that since the start. The Shadaime Hokage was a complete hyperactive goofball that married a trigger-happy seal master specialized in wide-area explosions and containment, generally of said explosions. The Nadaime was in whole of legendary proportion that managed to look innocent while humiliating every last one of his enemies. The Sandaime, a benevolent grandfather. The old monkey is a master seducer that worked in tandem with his wife. The both of them convinced more kunoichi to join Konoha than anyone else before, and those that resisted were literally, into joining them. I heard the old bastard had a freaking harem at his peak. And no one else could equal them? Asked a positively aghast Haku. There was one village, Uzushiogakure, home of the Uzumaki clan, that was at least as demented as Konoha. It took over 45,000 shinobi, trained specifically for the occasion, to take down 5,000 nut jobs. And the number of survivors was so small that they all fit in one boat. On that day, no less than 12 hidden villages died, and only one of them was the target. But the worst was to come. You see, before dying, the Uzumaki managed to ferry one of their own to Konoha. Just thinking about her gives me the creeps, whimpered Zabuza in anguish. Haku looked at her master in abject shock and horror. How could it be? How could the fearless demon of the bloody mist be so afraid? Uzumaki Kushina, the burning demon, the grinning reaper, the crimson death, the fury of whirlpool, the burning legion. So many nicknames, for one entity of evil and madness. She stopped a fireball the size of a house simply by refusing to be burnt once. I heard she once glared a Raiden jutsu into fizzling out. The only one worse than her was the Yondaime Hokage. That blonde bastard had bet he could go faster than light and strived to do just that, and what's worse is that the little bastard actually did it. Oh, by the gods, I shudder to think what could have happened if those two had a kid. It would be hell on earth. But what of the clans there? Are you kidding me? The clans produce the vast majority of their insane ninja. The Hyuga are a bunch of perverts with the biggest collection of fetishes ever. The Inuzuka are basically dogs in human skin that live for the thrill of life or death situations, and the Aburame are a walking nightmare with sadistic tendencies that they satisfy by sicking their hives upon their enemies, preferably when they don't see it coming. The Nara may seem lazy, but they are evil masterminds and no one really knows what they are planning. Their Yamanaka allies are mind controllers and that's evil enough, and the Akamichi are sadists that enjoy destroying other people's homes and hide it behind false jolliness. The Uchiha were among the biggest pyromaniacs ever. The Senju are completely over the top in nearly everything they do, and the Kurama enjoy nothing more than mind-raping unsuspecting victims. And then there's the Sarutobi. Oh dear God, the Sarutobi, they are downright evil. If you knew all they have their monkey summons do. And then there's also the Yuhi in there. And so, Zabuza listed the various clans of Konoha, big and small, to Haku and their mental disorders, leaving the young girl suitably impressed and terrified once they reached their hideout. Just when she was about to leave Zabuza's room to let him rest, however, she couldn't help but ask a question. Zabuza-sama, what was the particularity of the Uzumaki clan? Beyond freakishly red hair, they had ungodly stamina, fought in old samurai armor, and had little like slaves. Oh gods no. She had a kid. Mother Amaterasu save us. We're all gonna die. AAAAACHOW. Naruto-kun, are you okay? Asked Hinata worriedly. Yeah, no worry, someone must be talking about how awesome I am. He dismissed. Now, what scenes exactly are we going to reenact? Why not the part of Ika Ika recovery where Misao and Suki come to comfort Tenzo after that fight with Roku? Offered Yakumo. Oh, good one, exclaimed Hinata. I'll be Suki. Then we could act that moment of Ika Ika soft hands where Goku makes love to Yukiya and Asuka. I'd love to be Asuka. Sounds good to me. Smile Yakumo. Your thoughts Naru-kun. I like both of those scenes, so sure. But why not add the part of Ika Ika Thunderstorm where Tasuki and Miko give a show to Muta? Oh yeah, that's good. Happily gushed Yakumo. Kakashi and Anko looked at their charges, a single tear of pride flowing down each of their cheeks. Once they were situated at Chizuna's house, Naruto was dragged by Hinata and Yakumo upstairs for some important religious ritual, understand reenactment of some of the most depraved parts of Ika Ika. Sasuke began brooding like always. Sakura sat in a corner to reflect on her strange variation of feelings about Sasuke and newly discovered thirst for blood. Yakumo's psychotic threat about Zabuza had been strangely stimulating. Kurenai returned to sorting out the various shiny goodies her team had mercilessly looted from the old temple. Kakashi read a few more pages of porn. Anko went scouting for a beach appropriate enough for sunbathing, and Shino and Kiba sat in front of Obaswag Kenobi, who put down the borrowed Ika Ika he was reading and enjoying, to attend to his students. Very well, young ones. You are both far from completing your formation, mainly because you need to get laid first. A lot. But we can still train you for what is to come. First, you obviously need to meditate on your swag Kiba. Your grasp on it is shaky at best, and if we want the swag master order to rise again, 2 masters will go a long way. You Shino, must work on being more important. Don't fear extravagance, it is the mark of a real master. And honestly, sanity is overrated. I shall do as you ask, Master Kenobi. Why? Because that's why. Said Shino with a smirk, causing Obaswag to nod approvingly before turning to Kiba. So, basically, to be a good swag master, you gotta stop containing yourself. He asked tentatively, causing Obaswag's smirk to turn into a smile. That is correct. Kiba relaxed, and smirked. Should have realized that sooner. Gonna train with my swag saber. And with that Kiba went into the wood, pulling his saber from his belt, activating it and throwing it in the air in one movement before catching it, all that without looking. Naruto, from his spot on the bed, did his very best to avoid blinking, because losing even a fraction of second of what was happening before him would be a crime. Misao-chan. Demurely moaned Hinata as Yakumo kissed her neck from behind, one of her hands reaching into her panties while the other slipped past the open nurse uniform to cup one of the young Hyuga's S and softly mage it. "Come on, Suki-chan," the Y brunette whispered erotically, her breath tickling Hinata's neck and cheek, while her right hand danced to a rhythm of lust in her sacred valley. "Tenzo-kun suffered a lot today, we have to ease his pain. You love him, don't you?" Surely, Yakumo's right hand began to tease Hinata's nipple while the right's fingers began to curl inside of her. "You wouldn't want to miss an opportunity to show him your love. Why this is, oh, so, inappropriate. We shouldn't, hospital. What do you think Sozu-sensei is doing right now? He is with his girlfriend, making love to her in a hospital bed so that they both forget that she got hurt because of Roku. Why not do the same? Don't you want to comfort?" "Why yes I do, but. Then do." Breathed out Misao as she turned Suki's head to her and captured her lips in a searing kiss, causing the younger girl to moan and squirm sensually against her body. When she pulled back from the kiss, she smiled kindly to the young nurse. "It's time you show Tenzo-kun all of you," she whispered, before removing her hands from the young girl's most private area to help her remove her uniform and push her panties down to her feet. Tenzo looked in awe at the wonderfully proportioned body exposed to him. How could it be that such a beautiful woman was interested in his measly self? He was but a ninja, not even a genius, and she was an angel among men, so how could this goddess want to engage in the most intimate of acts with him? Maybe, just maybe the old man was right, maybe the gods did favor him. His eyes wandered around the body presented to him as she meekly approached him, visibly struggling to avoid covering herself. Her face was angelic, and yet the unholy fire of lust had made its way to her eyes. Her beautiful, pink, kissable lips were slightly parted, an invitation to plunder her mouth. The alabaster column of her neck looked so elegant, and yet so sinfully tempting. He wanted to mark this beautiful neck, to show everyone she was his and his alone. His eyes traveled to her plump, round, beautiful S, seeing those orbs made him want to love them, to squeeze them, to mage them until she was a moaning mess beneath him. His eyes traveled to her stomach, taut and smooth, the mark of a true kunoichi, before gliding across her womanly hips and down her slender and tantalizing legs, keeping her precious flower for last. Finally, as his eyes traveled upward to gaze upon the sacred valley that was calling for him, sweet honey moistening lips of velvet, under a finely trim. What the hell was that spiral doing there? Naruto looked up at Hinata and gave her a pointed stare, making her answer with a sheepish smile. With an amused smile, Naruto rolled his eyes and returned to his role. Tenzo smiled invitingly at Suki, extending his hand towards her. Hesitantly, Suki took the hand, and let herself be pulled forward. He s one of his arms around her waist, the other going behind her head to pull her into a soft, tender kiss. Suki went along, sitting on the bed and moaning softly in the kiss. Meanwhile, Misao stripped herself of her own uniform and underwear, a smile on her face. It seemed the little escapade she had with Suki in the shower room had given the girl some confidence. She confidently made her way to the bed, sitting just behind Suki and pressing herself against her back. "Maybe you should go to the next step, Suki-chan." She breathed in the ear of the younger nurse, causing her to break the kiss and nod meekly. Misao gently led her to Tenzo's lap and pulled the bed sheets aside, revealing Tenzo's tented boxers. "See what you're doing to him," she teased while nibbling on Suki's earlobe. "He's almost ready for you. We have to prepare him." Misao's soft hands grasped the hem of the boxers, and pulled them down slowly, letting Suki's eyes take everything in. When finally, Tenzo's pride was revealed, the young nurse gasped, before timidly extending a hand towards the pulsing, hardened organ. "That's it, Suki-chan, you have to make him feel good. Use your hand first," murmured Misao, guiding Suki's hand along Tenzo's shaft, a moan bursting from his throat when the soft skin came into contact with his hardness. That's it, Suki-chan," he breathed. "You're good at this. I just want to to make Tenzo-kun feel good. She said quietly, before gasping in surprise when Misao's hand found her core and began playing with it. Why don't you use your mouth for something else, Suki-chan? The expert temptress lightly sang in Suki's ear. Come on, he'll love it, you'll see. Trying to hold back her moans, Suki hesitantly brought her mouth closer to Tenzo's sword and gave it a tentative lick, causing her beloved to moan softly. She didn't really like the taste, it was so overwhelming, bitter. But for her Tenzo-kun, she would endure. She placed her lips around the bulbous head, and liked the tip slightly, hoping for a favorable reaction. Tenzo let his head fall back and moan loudly. Encouraged by this, emboldened by Misao's pleasuring fingers, she began to swirl her tongue around the tip, moaning softly from her senpai's lustful ministrations. Misao smiled. Oh, she knew just how to push the poor shy girl further. She glided down Suki's back, sinking to her knees and facing the wet, delicious flower her fingers were buried in. Without even removing her digits, she lashed out with her tongue, sensually caressing the quivering folds and causing the poor girl to moan and recoil from the unexpected touch, causing half of Tenzo's shaft to disappear in her mouth and eliciting a loud moan from the man. Suki almost panicked. She did not expect that. Her first impulse was to remove the stiff member from her mouth, but then Tenzo's moan registered and she decided that, if Tenzo liked it, then she would give him more of this. Tentatively, she began to move her head, hoping to mimic with her mouth the actions of her hands, and was pleased to hear Tenzo moan approvingly. She herself moaned when Misao sent another alt on her flower, and, to avoid making a mess, ed the fluids, getting yet another loud moan out of her lover. Emboldened by her various discoveries, yet fearful of hurting her love, she wrapped her lips around her teeth and began to bob up and down the shaft, eyeing on the offered meat for Tenzo's greatest pleasure. Meanwhile, Misao continued to plunder her sacred temple, both with tongue and fingers, causing the young nurse to moan loudly around her lover's tool. The lustful brunette's free hand began to trail down her own finely toned body, caressing her curves sensually, pausing to cup one of her S and squeeze it slightly, before brushing against her stomach, slipping through her carefully trimmed brown bush, and finally coming into contact with her own treasure. One finger caressed the tender lips, making her sigh in delight against Suki's quivering flower, before pushing inside, softly caressing her sensitive spots, making her moan out. A second finger joined the first as the heel of the palm teased the sensitive bundle of nerves that lay hidden amongst the flesh. With a moan, Suki reached her peak, Tenzo joining her a second later. Ah, it seemed the appetizers were done. Good. Suki tried not to gag at the bitter liquid in her mouth, and instead forced herself to swallow it. She could not explain why she did this, it seemed so dirty. But everything they were doing was dirty, so it probably was the thing to do. Panting, she removed the still rock-hard shaft from her mouth and looked at Tenzo, silently asking what would come next. With a gentle smile, Tenzo took her hand and slowly pulled her onto the bed, moving her to straddle him. As she laid her hands on his shoulders, he gripped his shaft and began to tease her opening, making the young girl gasp in surprise and slight pleasure. One of his hands slid up her frame, caressing every curve, before nestling itself behind her neck, and gently guiding her down into a kiss. Suki-chan, do you really want it? Tenderly asked Tenzo. Yes. The young woman answered with a shy smile. I want to become one with Tenzo-kun. Nodding and smiling at the angel above him, Tenzo relocated his hands on her hips, and began to guide her down, kissing her lovingly when she began to groan from discomfort. He had been with many women and taken his fair share of virginities, but this was special, it was Suki-chan, so he was especially gentle with her, no matter how much he wanted to ravage her, to make her his and his only, to imprint himself upon her until she could have no one else. But his love for her was greater than his lust, and so, he reined in his baser impulses. When finally their hips came into contact, Suki was panting, leaning against him, pressing her luscious chest against his muscled torso, each pant causing the skins to rub together in a most enticing way. However, before he could lose himself in the wonderful feeling of his lovely Suki-chan pressing herself against him, skin to skin, Tenzo felt Misao straddling his legs, just behind Suki. The temptress slipped her arms around the falling angel, pulling Suki back up until her chest was pressed against Suki's back, exposing the younger nurse to Tenzo's ravenous gaze. Sensually, Misao's hands slid up Suki's curvaceous body, stopping on her chest and maging the beautiful orbs in plain sight of Tenzo, causing the man's hands to tighten slightly around Suki's hips. It was obvious from the smirk on Misao's face, she wanted nothing more than to see Tenzo lose control and ravage Suki like he had ravaged herself, but he would resist, he wouldn't fall to lust, for his beloved's sake. Moaning softly, and unaware of her lover's internal conflict, Suki enjoyed the ministrations of her depraved senpai, and began to rise her hips, before pushing them back down, sighing in pleasure and contentment. As she rose again, she noticed she was a bit unsteady, and placed her hands on Tenzo's chest. Feeling curious, Suki began to rotate her hips, hoping to elicit a favorable reaction from her lover, and she was rewarded with Tenzo throwing his head back and groaning in pleasure. Feeling emboldened, Suki began to ride Tenzo, moaning happily each time her hips fell back on his, throwing her head back when he hit a certain spot in her and letting out a loud groan of delight. Tenzo couldn't resist anymore, he had to have her, to make her experience even more bliss, to mark her as his. Tightening his grip on her hips, he began to attack her, meeting her thrust for thrust, causing her to gasp and moan even more pianely. Sending one of his hands off of Suki and onto the bed, he pulled himself up until he was facing her fully as she relocated her hands from his abs to his shoulders. The way her face contorted in pleasure was just too much for him, he kissed her hotly, wildly, possessively, dominantly. He noted, in the back of his mind, that Suki's movements were becoming erratic, her breathing ragged, and he instantly knew what it meant. Oh, he would bring her over the edge and join her in pure delight, and he knew how to achieve that. Hungrily, he began to ravage her with his mouth, nipping, licking, giving special attention to those rosy buds that kept taunting him. At the same time, his second hand left Suki's hips to reach behind her and slip 2 fingers in Misao's slick womanhood, making the temptress moan slightly in appreciation. Progressively, Suki's moans became louder and louder as she rode Tenzo to completion, relishing this chance to, at last, bring him to ecstasy. A particularly hard-angled thrust from Tenzo slammed into her sweetest spot, making the young nurse throw her head back and cry out in delight as the coils of her paean unwound violently, a wave of pleasure washing over her as she felt Tenzo's warm, life-giving seed flood into her. As she laid back against Misao, her head resting on her shoulder, panting in exhaustion, her flawless, sensual body exposed to Tenzo's lustful gaze, she wondered if, maybe, she would be granted her second greatest wish, to have Tenzo's child grow in her. Misao liked her lips in anticipation as she removed the slightly comatose Suki from Tenzo's shaft, ignoring her displeased whine while she set her down next to the man, and exposing the glorious love rod she yearned for. However, before she could mount this wild stud, he flickered out of sight, and she suddenly felt her arms being pulled back and locked behind her, a very manly chest pressing against her and keeping her from moving while a burning shaft dug into her backside. "You were naughty, Misao-chan," growled Tenzo disapprovingly. "You tried to make me lose control on Suki-chan. I already told you she deserved better. What? Not going to go all out on Suki-chan?" She teased. "Don't think she deserves you at your wildest and most pianate. It was her first time, I didn't want to hurt her." He growled angrily. "But you are a beast, Tenzo-kun, you'll lose control eventually." She purred. "And then, what will happen?" She seductively taunted. However, Tenzo merely smirked meanly. "Let's find out, shall we?" And with that, he rammed into her, pushing her down while keeping her arms trapped behind her back, until Misao was more or less in front of Suki's womanhood. "Lick," he ordered. His tone allowed no argument, so she licked. Suki began to moan in pleasure again, as Tenzo began to pummel Misao's moist cavern with abandon. While he had been tender and loving with Suki, he was now wild and merciless, letting his lust and anger take him over to punish this little that tried to make him hurt his Suki-chan. Savagely, he thrust his hips forward, animalistic grunts bursting from his throat as he ravaged the quivering Misao. Yet, he could feel no fear from the temptress. This creature of lust was shaking with pleasure. He did not care. What mattered was exhausting her so he could have more time with Suki. Speaking of which, when he looked at his sweet Suki, he saw her gasping in pleasure, her back arched off the bed, body glistening with sweat, with her legs wrapped around Misao's head to keep her in place. Her tongue traveled sensually across her lips, her hips were bucking wildly against Misao's face, and her eyes were clouded with lust and desire. It made him moan and hammer even more powerfully into the depraved nurse trapped between them, hitting spots that sent Misao over the edge. Through sheer stubbornness, Tenzo managed not to peek and instead pulled out of Misao, pulled her upright before forcing her to move forward until her womanhood was pressed against Suki. Once the two flowers were snugly pressed against each other, Tenzo brutally sheathed himself in Misao's, before pummeling the delectable behind savagely. Misao could only moan incoherently as she received the pounding of a lifetime, her eyes rolling back into her skull as Tenzo ravaged her. With a scream, she reached her peak violently, and fell unconscious. Tenzo grunted as he emptied himself in Misao and panted, trying to regain his breath. He placed Misao on the bed and looked to Suki. She was looking at him, her eyes bright with desire and love. Tenzo-kun, can you go, one more time? She meekly asked. Tenzo smiled and took a handkerchief from the bedside table, pouring some water from his bottle on it, before cleaning his still hard tool. Now, I'm good to go, he said, crawling towards his lover. Slowly, he lay on top of her, enjoying the way her arms immediately wrapped around him and her body pressed against his. Lovingly, he kissed her as his shaft entered her once more. Suki gasped in the kiss, still not used to the sensation running along her nerves. Tenzo began to move, slowly at first, before speeding up, until he was taking her at a steady rhythm, making the beautiful nurse moan happily. Suki weakly tried to wrap her legs around his waist, but they fell back on the bed, slipping on the sweat that covered his body. It didn't take long to bring her to the edge of the precipice, but the look in her eyes was begging him to jump with her. And he was happy to oblige, so, he stopped resisting the pleasure, and with a few last, wild thrusts, pushed her to ravishment once again, and joined her into sweet, pleasurable oblivion. As they came down from their high, they kissed lovingly, and embraced each other, only separating long enough to pull the sheets over the three sweaty bodies lying in the bed, Misao unconsciously squirming closer to them. And finally, they fell asleep, content and happy. Naruto sighed tiredly and sent a clone to stop the camera. If that didn't get the Ika Club's approval, nothing would. Once the clone had done its job, he allowed himself to fall asleep. Zabuza was pacing as fast as his still burning buttocks allowed him to, meaning very slowly. He was faced with an unprecedented threat, a scion of both Konoha and Uzushio. His madness factor must have been squared, and he was not willing to face that, ever. Desperately, he tried to remember everything possible from his old history lessons about the Uzumaki clan, but it was kind of hard. It was long, long ago, and most of what defined the Uzumaki had been removed to avoid shocking their young, at the time, minds. But they were trained to kill. Go figure. Haku re-entered the room, looking slightly flushed and disturbed. Zabuza looked at her inquisitively, hoping she had found a solution to this problem. If she hadn't, they would hunt them down just for fun. He just knew it. So, well, I found something on the Uzumaki, but, well, she reluctantly stammered. What is it? Demanded Zabuza, almost freaking out. I know how to deal with most of them, just not the Uzumaki. The Hyuga can be appeased with a sacrifice, male or female, virgin or not, as long as it's able. The Uchiha, just light up a bonfire. The Aburame should be pacified with a few weird bugs. the Inuzuka should be calmed with another sacrificial, and the psychic nutjob should be contained with an offering of those books, same for Kakashi. The purplet is one of the Leaf's top interrogator, a few poisons should calm her down. And Pinky doesn't have anything for her whatsoever. I need a way to deal with the Uzumaki. Well, the book said the Uzumaki were known for building up harems, especially the clan heads. And they often did it by recruiting captured enemy kunoichi and convincing them to join. Zabuza paused for a moment before nodding. The Sandame's wife was the apprentice of the Shidame's wife, and Hashirama married an Uzumaki. I guess the Sarutobi treatment came from her. So we need to find a kunoichi too. His gaze stopped on Haku. Yeah, she was more or less his adopted daughter. Yes, she had faithfully stood by his side through thick or thin. She had indeed been diligent in the treatment of all his injuries, but where the hell would he find a kunoichi in this country? Zabuza-sama. Haku wasn't sure she liked the way her master was looking at her. She knew full well what he was thinking, and normally, she would have been horrified and hurt, but after reading about the Uzumaki's UAL prowess, she wasn't so sure anymore. Sakura was puzzled. She was a gentle, refined woman, a lady, so why was she struggling to keep her temper in check when faced with the state this village was in? Why was her bloodlust shooting through the roof? And why had she just slaughtered 8 bandits like it was nothing? There was blood everywhere and it didn't even bother her. Something was wrong with her, but then again, wasn't there something wrong with nearly every high-ranking ninja? Hey, maybe it was the sign she'd be something awesome. With that thought, Sakura left the crime scene, whistling heartily and walking to the nearest stream to remove the blood and gore from her form. Yakumo stumbled down the stairs with a silly smile and a limp, thoroughly satisfied and glowing with post-coitus satisfaction. She collapsed in her chair, sighing in happiness. Naruto was so good she wasn't even sore. Just how awesome was that guy? Maybe she'd look his way when time came to settle down and produce an heir. Looking around, Yakumo noticed a few things. Shino was meditating and somehow floating off the ground, his insects flying around him in a neatly organized ring. Kiba was using some kind of telekinesis to craft a smaller version of his own sword thingy, with Akamaru panting happily next to him. Sasuke was in a corner, sulking as always. Anko was inspecting her. Fun kits, one for torture, the other for, and Kakashi was paying his respects to Holy Ika Ika. Tazuna was sitting in a corner, blushing and looking thoughtfully at his drink, while the house brat, Inari if she remembered well, was sitting in a corner. Sensei, where are Pinky and Tsunami-san? She asked Anko curiously. In town, getting groceries. Your activities with Naruto and Hinata left them quite red, said the snake mistress with a smirk. Speaking of activities, answered Yakumo, pulling off her best puppy eyes, why didn't you tell me about the Ika Ika movie club? Didn't know there was an Ika Ika movie club. Yakumo shrugged, back to normal. Oh, well, anyway, what should we do next? I mean, won't Zabuza come back? Maybe, lazily answered Kakashi. But then we'll just destroy him. We should also remove Gato, it would make things easier. Yakumo nodded thoughtfully. Besides, it would make the locals quite thankful. Maybe I can even get a few to agree to an orgy. Tazuna blushed at this casual declaration, but Anko only smirked. Maybe you will, Hot Pants Chan, maybe you will. A few days had passed, and Haku was still unsure about Zabuza's decision. Walking through the forest to gather the herbs necessary for the recovery of her teacher's burnt, she pondered her situation. She was essentially doomed by her master, father figure to the life of a slave. Her daily lot would be to be pinned to walls by a lustful Uzumaki, and mounted there, to have amazing every day her master would be there, and to be at the mercy of depraved harem members the rest of the time. She would spend the rest of her life in a fog of UAL gratification and daily orgasms. She would bear children to a man that would worship her body nearly every night in a frenzy of paean and pleasure. She would, ah damn, here she was, daydreaming about her future life again. She was supposed to be revolted and horrified, not giddy. With a heavy sigh, she resigned herself to self-pleasure in order to counteract the burning in her loins, again. However, before she could indulge in carnal pleasure, she heard a sound that only served to stoke the flames of her lust. A moan, long and drawn out, filled with pleasure and lust. Curiously, she made her way to the place the moan was coming from, only to hear more and more impioned calls. Heat pooled on her cheeks and in her belly, a primal call to submit to the greater male that could make a woman emit those cries, a need to feel the same ecstasy and bliss. When she reached the source of those amorous sounds, she saw the profile of the Hyuga she had seen firing arrows at Zabuza, her back against a tree, her purple kimono open and hanging loosely around her, her legs and arms wrapped around her lover, a blonde-haired boy dressed in a burnt orange kimono with a red spiral on the back who had his face buried in her neck and his hands firmly gripping her thighs. With animalistic grunts, the boy thrusted powerfully into his blue-haired lover, causing more of her peonate moans to escape her lips. It was so entrancing, so sinfully exciting, so arousing, Haku couldn't stop watching as the blonde boy dominated the Hyuga, who turned into mush under the lustful and peonate alt. Slowly, her hand crept into her underwear, her deft fingers slipping into her burning heat. Haku was so convinced that it was just, both because of what she saw and what Zabuza had told her of the Hyuga clan, that she was completely caught off guard when the girl began proclaiming her love for her partner and let a gasp escape her lips. Thankfully, the two were too engrossed in their lovemaking to notice, so Haku returned to pleasuring herself, panting softly as she admired the way the Hyuga's face contorted in pleasure, or the way her S pressed against her partner's hardened pectorals. As her gaze traveled down, she saw that the man, she could no longer think of him as a boy, had raised the blue-haired woman's leg up a bit, giving her a perfect view of his manhood as it disappeared repeatedly in the Hyuga's moistened flower. Biting her lower lip gently, Haku increased the pace of her fingers, her eyes fixated on the glorious spear relentlessly plunging in the Hyuga's folds. She was so engrossed in the delicious spectacle offered to her that she actually yelped when she felt two arms wrap around her waist. Shock, emberment and shame danced on her face as she turned, and saw the exact same boy plowing the Hyuga holding her flush against him. In the same state of dress. And arousal too if the hot and hard rod pressing against her backside was any indication. Oh, Naruto-kun, it seems your clone, found our audience. Moaned out the Hyuga, making Haku blush even more. That he did Hinata-chan. Growled the now named Naruto, looking at her from the corner of his eye. And he is going to punish our audience long and hard too. Haku felt fear, excitement, desire build up in her as the clone holding her opened her kimono, tugged on her chest bindings until they fell off her, and pushed her panties to the side. All the while, she could see the original taking his lover peonately, making her arousal skyrocket. Then, she felt the clone press the head of a very hard, very hot rod against her folds, and slowly push in her, stretching her like nothing ever did before. Haku was a kunoichi, and thus had no hymen left due to training. Combined with her wetness, she felt him slide in smoothly and painlessly. With a moan, she felt him bottom out inside of her, before slowly beginning to saw in and out of her. She was acutely aware of the fact that the clone of a complete stranger was mounting her in plain view of said stranger and his lover. And it excited her. She felt the clone's hands slide up her body to cup her S, and, falling to the call of lust, sent hers to grip his hips and pull him into her, make him go deeper in her. She lost control of her voice, and began to moan wantonly, begging this man that was taking her, ravishing her, to make her feel more, always more. Oh, yes, please Naruto-sama, take me more. Certainly my sweet grunt, but tell me your name first. Ha Haku, my name is Haaaaaa. The second attempt at saying her name was drowned in her cry of ecstasy as he hammered vigorously into that particular spot that makes women go insane with pleasure. Haku could only feel pleasure, only smell, only hear moans and pants, only taste the lust in the air, and only see the two patron deities of Ullati presiding over her first time as they mated. To her lust-addled mind, they looked like divine entities descended from the heaven to bestow upon her a blessing of pleasure, like a foreshadowing of her future life. She'd feel much better about being handed over to the Uzumaki if it meant being ed up like that on a daily basis, once she emerged from her induced coma that is. For now, she simply reveled in the pure, unadulterated pleasure she felt, mewling in delight as Naruto-sama ravaged her and Hinata-sama lustfully caressed her form with her eyes, filled with desire and pleasure. Haku knew she wouldn't last long, she only hoped she could peak with them. As if hearing her prayer, both Naruto began to pick up speed, hammering more erratically in their respective lovers, causing more moans, grunts and squeals to escape the two females. Naruto-kun, I'm almost there, called out Hinata with Paon before pulling her love to her in a peonate kiss, grinding her hips frantically into his. Haku felt her Naruto-sama press himself more against her back, nibbling on her neck, and whispering in a strained voice. Are you close, Haku-chan? Haku smiled and nodded, lost in the pleasure, before her face was turned and warm, rough lips pressed against her own. She moaned in the kiss, enjoying the new sensation, only for a foreign tongue to invade her mouth and plunder its depth with the zeal of the greatest conquerors. It didn't take more for her to reach the edge and fall over with a muffled scream of pleasure, her vision disappearing in white. When she came to, a few seconds later, she saw that Naruto-sama had let Hinata-sama place her feet on the ground while the clone behind her had tightened his hold on her. She was grateful for this, because her knees were honestly too weak to keep her upright. Hinata-sama began walking towards her, her kimono still open, revealing her sizable S, slightly bigger than Haku's, but still so delicious looking, was she a biawal. That was new, and the lone trail of Naruto-sama's sacred seed lazily falling down her right leg. Haku could only feel awe and arousal as lust made manifest walk to her, before pressing her bountiful S against her own. Now Haku-chan, why don't you explain to us why a little kunoichi like you is here in wave? Haku stiffened. Should she deny? Play dumb. Let Zabuza-sama down completely and negotiate a place in Naruto-sama's harem. Because, surely, a man of such virility could not be content with just one woman. No use denying, silkily murmured Hinata-sama, her hands reaching her sides and sensually caressing her. These eyes see all. You are with Zabuza, aren't you? Haku, her heart in her throat, nodded and lowered her head. She barely knew them, but they had shown such tenderness, such care, they had given her such pleasure, she couldn't bear to disappoint them or face their disapproval. However, Hinata-sama kissed her, using her lips to bring her face back up. Haku was shocked, she had just admitted to being their enemy and Hinata-sama was still so kind. How was such a thing possible? Now, you liked what Naruto-kun did, purred Hinata. Haku, feeling the still stiff manhood inside her, nodded eagerly. Well, you can get more of it if you help us. I wish I could, Hinata-sama, said Haku sorrowfully, not noticing the slight surprise Hinata displayed at the honorific. Bu Zabuza-sama wants to offer me to the Uzumaki in your group, to appease you and stop you from chasing him. To Haku's surprise, both Naruto, who was now behind Hinata and shamelessly groping her rear, Hinata herself, and the clone, grinned happily. Oh, but Haku-chan, Naruto-kun is our Uzumaki. So, you gave yourself to the one Zabuza wants to offer you to. The cat-like grin on Hinata's face turned Haku on so much it was almost painful. Now, since that is out of the way, you will help us, right? The question was punctuated by a shallow thrust from the clone behind her and by Hinata pressing her S against hers some more, making Haku moan in bliss and desire. Yes, Hinata-sama, I'll do everything you want, said Haku lustfully. She needed this, she needed to feel this ecstasy again, to feel the glorious rush of warm seed pouring in her. She'd do anything to experience it again. Good girl, said Hinata before kissing her peonately. You will tell Zabuza that you made contact with us by chance, and that we are willing to negotiate. Tomorrow, You'll come back here to take a scroll where we'll write our conditions for negotiating and you'll take it to Zabuza. After we play some, of course. Clear, sweetie. Very Hinata-sama, said Haku, noticing that, at some point in the conversation, her arms had wrapped themselves around Hinata. Said woman smiled kindly at her. Very good, now we can go back to having fun. Then, she kissed Haku straight on the lips as both Naruto and his clone began thrusting again. Haku only knew pleasure. Hinata, covered in sweat but having caught her breath, looked with great satisfaction as Haku left the clearing, her basket full of herbs to heal Zabuza and hopefully butter him up for negotiation. She looked at Naruto, who was lying on the ground, tired but visibly pleased. He had, after all, filled 2 girls with his seed repeatedly in the last hour, it was reasonable for him to be tired. So, how did I do? Asked Hinata with a smile. Very good, honey, answered Naruto with a matching grin. She'll fall right into our hands, and then our bed. Zabuza wanting to negotiate is unexpected, but hardly unwelcome. It will make the mission much easier. But what about the Ika wagon he destroyed? Asked Hinata. This sin can be erased if he performs escort missions of Ika spreading personnel. It'll take time, but his soul and libido can be saved. Hinata nodded and snuggled in his side, sighing happily. It is wonderful, my love. We won AY Kunoichi to our side on our first mission with other ninjas around. Your ancestors would be so proud. I am sure they are, my beloved, I am sure they are. Meanwhile, in the pure world, Uzumaki Soburo, last overlord before the fall of Whirlpool and Naruto's grandfather, looked his descendant cuddle with AY Hyuga after fornicating all afternoon long with 2 hot girls. He was proud, so very proud. Oh, Naruto, my precious grandson, seeing you getting so much is warming this old heart. Go on, my beloved grandson, you have the blessing of the Uzumaki ancestors. Behind him, many depraved and lustful redheads nodded in approval, a few giving thumbs up to the latest overlord, perverted grins on their face. Then, they returned to preparing the welcoming party for Jiraiya. He may not be Uzumaki by blood, but he was by soul. I suddenly feel like I've earned the complete approval of my ancestors. Mused Naruto. Weird. Oh, well, we have to report to the others about this. Then we can have in the shower and go to bed. Sounds like a plan, smiled Hinata. However, before they could go back, they needed to clean up. They had found that the smell of left their host a bit uneasy, so they made sure to keep the smell out of the house as much as possible, it would be rude to do otherwise. The problem that was the lack of room had been solved when Naruto had used those summoning stones to bring in another building, one that looked like a little fort. It had enough rooms for all 3 teams, and then some, but only 2 teams at a time used it, so as to make sure the client was always protected. After washing up, they quickly returned to the house-turned-small fort, and explained the situation, only hinting at how they had convinced Haku to avoid making the inhabitants of the house uneasy. Kakashi and Anko nodded appreciatively, and before long an official negotiation proposal was drawn up. The next day, Naruto and Hinata found Haku at the spot they first met and, after savagely ravishing her again for hours on end, they gave her the message that she quickly relayed to Zabuza. Needless to say, the swordsman was overjoyed at their willingness to negotiate, and they set up the meeting on the bridge 2 weeks later, under the cover of Zabuza going to finish the job once he had recovered. In the meantime, the Konoha teams would train in preparation for the upcoming battle, officially with Zabuza, in reality with Gato's forces. On his part, Zabuza was preparing what he needed for the negotiations. He had recruited a pretty girl from the village for the Inuzuka, given Haku money to buy lingerie to satisfy both the Hyuga and the Uzumaki. They were engaged. What luck! Supplies to build up a pyre to appease the Uchiha, a brand new chakra-conductive paddle for that Mitarashi woman, those Ika books for the brunette nut job and Kakashi, a scroll of exotic genjutsu for the Yuhi. Those red eyes gave her away, and thanks to the intel brought back by Haku, he knew he had to hire another local girl for the Aburame rather than waste time hunting for bugs. All in all, things looked good. And with Haku ensuring his was healing fine, he'd be out of this mess soon. Now, he just had to pee time. Maybe those books would help. The day for the negotiations had arrived, and the Konoha teams were making their way to the bridge, armed to the teeth and fully armored as was proper for peace talks, leaving a squad of minions to protect the bridge builder. The weather was cloudy, and a Dane fog engulfed the outermost reaches of the bridge. At the start of the bridge, Zabuza was there, wearing a shirt for once, his sword on his back, and 3 girls behind him. One had long black hair, a healthy blush and giddy expression, and was wearing a light blue kimono that, everyone noticed, with just a few adjustments to the obi could be turned into a battle robe, marking her as a kunoichi. The second was a blushing and nervous blonde girl, about 15, wearing a light green yukata that matched her emerald eyes. She was quite cute. The last girl was a redhead with hazel eyes that had a flaming blush completely at odds with her stoic expression, wearing an orange yukata. Next to the group was a pile of oiled wood. Zabuza bowed a bit, he kept them in sight suspiciously, as tradition dictated, and pulled out several items. Among them, 2 volumes of the latest Ika Ika book, published just 3 days ago. All the Ika Ika fans present followed his movements like hawks. I come in peace, so that we may resolve our conflicts. We come in peace, so that we may resolve our conflicts. Answered Kakashi, with an equally careful bow, as tradition dictates. I have with me presents to foster goodwill between us. For Hataki-san and Kurama-san, I have these books, written by Jiraiya-sama of the Sanin, may his muse never betray him. The last bit was said in a surprisingly fervent voice, which prompted a reaction from Yakumo. Have you seen the glory of the books? She asked curiously. To their surprise, Zabuza actually teared up a bit. Yes I have, and I curse myself for destroying a wagon full of those marvels. I shall repent for this sin by finding Jiraiya-sama and offering him my services as a gatherer of research, so that his books may be published faster. Then you are forgiven for your misgivings. We accept your gift graciously, answered Yakumo, bowing lightly, before stepping forward and taking the books. She smelled them a bit and smiled. Ah, a neurolytic poison, my favorite. Yes, I thought it'd be a nice touch. Anyway, for Yuhi-san, I have this scroll on exotic genjutsu. I hope you will like it. Kurenai came forward curiously and took the scroll before looking quickly through it and smiling. Ah, yes, there are 3 of them I don't know. I thank you for your addition to my collection. Zabuza nodded before resuming. For Mitarashi-san, I offer this chakra-conductive paddle. I noticed you liked this weapon, I hope it will be to your satisfaction. Enko took the paddle and juggled it a bit, channeling chakra in it before smiling wolfishly. Ha, now I can double-wield my paddles. Awesome. Thanks, Cupcake, she said before turning back and smirking at Zabuza's slight twitch, her rear swinging slightly. Anyway, muttered Zabuza. To Hyuga-san and Uzumaki-san, I offer Haku-chan. Please, take good care of her. As soon as Zabuza finished talking, Haku literally teleported to Naruto and Hinata, looking slightly expectant, and being rewarded for her eagerness by a searing kiss from both. While Naruto kissed Haku silly and groped her generously, Hinata turned to Zabuza and bowed slightly. We accept her and promise to treat her with the utmost care. For Aburame-san and Inuzuka-san, I offer these 2 girls, Kokuo-san and Shimizu-san. I have already cleared things with their parents, you can take them back to Konoha with you should you wish it. The redhead stepped forward. I am Abuno Shimizu. I am at your service. Kiba and Shino looked at each other for a second before Shino stepped forward. I am Aburame Shino, I promise you to take good care of you. He said with a sensual smirk that caused the young girl to slightly lose her composure. Smoothly, Shino stepped up to her and offered her his arm. Shimizu wrapped her arm around his and followed him back to the Konoha group. Then, the blonde girl stepped forward, visibly uncomfortable. I am Miza Hana K Kokuo. I am at your service. Kiba walked forward with a wolfish smirk that somehow didn't look threatening. I am Inuzuka Kiba, Pleased to meet you. I'll take good care of you, he said, before offering his arm. The blushing and embered girl took it and followed him back to the group. To Uchiha-san, I offer this pyre, so that you may indulge in your love for fire. Sasuke looked almost like he would refuse, before scowling, and grunting in acceptance. Then, Kakashi spoke up. We have also brought a gift for you. We offer you this sword maintenance kit, specifically created for masterwork swords. Zabuza accepted the kit, nodding in appreciation. This was good stuff. Alright, now we can talk. Haku probably already told you this, but I want to leave this island without any more fighting. Do you agree to this? Yes, we can agree to this, especially since now you'll be working for the glory of Ika Ika. Answered Kakashi. Now, what can you tell us on Gato's fortress? It is a fortified manor more or less in the middle of the island, on a hill. There are 2 walls, but only one is really worth anything. There are about 150 thugs there, plus a few around the island. He should be. Zabuza stopped and frowned, turning to look at the other side of the bridge, where a clamor was rising. The mist parted, revealing an army of bandits and mercenaries, with a diminutive man at their helm. What is this? Screamed the ridiculously small man. Zabuza, why are you not fighting them? Because they are the most dangerous kind of ninja Konoha can produce, and I want to live. Meh, I plan to kill you anyway. Alright men, kill them all. The thugs roared and readied their weapons. Kakashi pulled his tanto out, spinning it in reverse grip. Anko gripped a paddle firmly in each hand. Zabuza pulled his sword from his back. Yakumo began to float off the ground. Both Hinata and Naruto raised their left hands, twin horns blaring to life as 2 armies of minions barreled out of the forest, easily 200 in numbers, while the blonde put his helmet on. Kiba and Shino pulled out their swag sabers, Kiba throwing the miniature one he made for Akamaru in the air, the small dog jumping and gripping the weapon in his maw and activating it. Haku, in a burst of chakra, summoned an armor suit of ice around her kimono, modeling it after Naruto's, but with jagged, icy spikes jutting from her kabuto, her mempo the image of a Yuki Onna, and a nodashi of ice resting on her shoulder. Sasuke with a smirk, walked past both Sakura and Yakumo. Step back little girls, and let the real fighters do their job. He said arrogantly. The pinkett seemed to shake for a moment, before gripping his shoulder and throwing him behind her, into a tree trunk. You step back bitch. Her eyes bloodshot, her teeth bared in a fearsome snarl, she slammed her hand onto the bridge, and into a pool of blood that suddenly bubbled into existence, seemingly gripping something as the whole bridge looked at her in shock. Blood began to climb up her frame as she heaved a large shape out of the blood pool, pulling it out with a large splash as she became more and more covered in blood. Blood for the blood god. Skulls for the skull throne. She screamed, cackling madly while the blood on her drained away, revealing a wicked armor suit of iron, VR and copper, her hair changed and looking like strands of blood, and in her hands, a large axe with many, many small teeth along where its edge should be. Pressing some kind of trigger straight into the handle, she cackled with glee as the teeth roared to life and turned to a fast-moving edge with a whir of metal and motor, and a bloody scream of fury somehow emerging from the axe. Her chain axe firmly in her hands, Sakura charged into the fray, chanting along the way. Kill, maim, burn, kill, maim, burn, kill, maim, burn, kill, maim, burn. The shocked goons hesitated, but soon began running back when the rest of the ninja followed the raging pink head's charge. What followed was a bloody slaughter, with Sakura dancing and laughing in the middle of it, her chain axe carving a bloody path through the army in front of her, lobbing off heads and limbs, cleaving men in half and spilling their entrails across the bridge. And she loved it. Korn, Prince of Slaughter. Guide my axe. She bellowed in maddened joy as she split a man from top to bottom, reveling the blood that drenched her. Blood for the blood god. Blood for the blood god. Blood for the blood god. Stop screaming girly, I can't hear myself kill. Roared Zabuza. You, eyebrows. Screamed Sakura back, a manic grin on her face, as she effortlessly dissembled 5 men in a single swipe. Needless to say, it was a slaughter, with Gato dying somewhere in the chaos. He was not mourned. As the last 3 thugs died, bisected with a single swipe of Sakura's axe, everyone refocused on the now redhead. Sakura relaxed, her armor melting into blood and flowing down her frame, disappearing into the ground. Then, she turned and smiled brightly, still covered in blood and the occasional bit of gut. Well, that was refreshing. She chirped joyously. Haven't had that much fun in, ever. Then, she skipped to Sasuke, who was extracting himself from the tree she had thrown him in, showing everyone the strange, stylized skull symbol in place of the white circle on her back. Once in front of Sasuke, she waited until he was back on his feet, smiling brightly all along, and just before he could start insulting her and demanding why she had done that, she spoke. "I'm dumping you," she happily announced. "And I'm taking Ino-chan with me. And before you say anything, Ino-chan and I have been ing each other senseless over your sleeping for the last month. That's the only way we get any fun in the sack. See ya, loser." And with that, she happily walked away, leaving a dumbfounded crowd. Then Haku, who was covered in blood too, like everyone else, and had about a foot of intestine hanging from one of her helm spikes, noticed something. "Is it me or did her get bigger?" Before anyone could answer, Sakura did in a roar. "Yes. Corn be praised for giving me killer titties." Zabuza had taken his leave yesterday after the battle to find his soon-to-be new master and serve the holy cause of Ika Ika, while the group had returned to the fort. Naruto had summoned his builder minions to prepare a building where the soon-to-be-ready next portal gem would be placed and sent minions to secure the loot from Gato's stronghold before taking Haku to the quarters he shared with Hinata and ravishing his lovers all night long in an orgy of sensuality. Kiba and Shino had also taken good care of their girls, turning them into pleasured putty. Of course, it was nothing compared to the moaning pile of ally blissful goo Haku had become, but still, very good for a first time. Since the news of Gato's unfortunate demise had spread, Yakumo had been able to get 5 local teens into an orgy. And of course the squad of minions left to guard Tazuna's house had full stomachs and 2 new, shiny blades. Now, it was morning, and everyone was gathered at the breakfast table. Sasuke, still sore as all hell from his rapid meeting with Tree Bark, was glaring angrily at Sakura, who simply didn't give a. Tsunami was still in the shower, so they had some time before it was time to eat. Shino and Kiba were helping their new lovers to sit down. Akamaru sneaked between the 2 girls and offered his belly for petting. Enko was boasting to Yakumo about her 129 combo from yesterday, and Kakashi was being his usual self, his nose buried in his book. Everyone else was peacefully waiting for Tsunami to be ready. "By the way, Sakura, who's that corn you kept mentioning yesterday?" asked Hinata curiously. "Ah, yes," exclaimed the now red-haired girl enthusiastically. "Corn is the god of blood, battle, warriors, slaughter and breakfast." Breakfast. Sakura slammed a big box of cereals and a carton of milk on the table, somehow destroying neither of them. "Milk for the corn flakes," she bellowed before pulling a bowl from nowhere and pouring herself cereals and milk. Then she pulled a spoon of red metal with the same kind of toothy edge as her axe, activated the now revealed chainspoon and began eating ravenously, somehow not hurting herself, despite obviously licking the moving edge. Is it because of his connection to breakfast and milk that your S grew?" asked Hinata carefully. Swallowing, Sakura turned to her. "Yep. And also because he didn't like the idea of one of his followers looking scrawny." She grinned happily while grabbing her S. "And now I'm not scrawny anymore, hell nah. Oh, Ino-chan will have so much fun with those 2. And, why exactly is he connected to breakfast? It's unusual considering his other focus." "Oh, that's because the Rakudo beat him in a duel and told him to find a hobby. He chose cereal making." At that moment, Tsunami entered the room and headed for the kitchen, Obaswag arriving closely behind. "Good morning everyone," he chirped happily in his ghostly voice. Good morning, sensei, answered Shino. I believe you provided Tsunami-san with entertainment. Yes. That I did, my boy. It is a mission of the Swaggy Order. We must provide entertainment to bored people that meet our preferences as often as we can. It is one of the main reasons we always had such a good relationship with the Uzumaki. Then you might want to entertain Sasuke's fan club. He's a complete bore in bed, mentioned Sakura, ignoring Sasuke's glare pianely. Kiba and Shino looked at each other and smirked. Don't you dare, growled out Sasuke. Hinata led Haku back to their room, licking her lips as she thought of all the fun she could have with her. Naruto had to attend to the building of the portal, since this gem was far simpler than the one Gnarl used in Konoha, which meant that the two girls were alone, with a big empty bed, and nothing to do. An impish smile formed on her face. Haku was quivering with excitement. She could feel in her loins Hinata-sama's lust, and she just couldn't wait for what she would do to her. She closed the door of Naruto-sama's quarters behind her, and immediately felt Hinata-sama press herself against her and slip her hands into Haku's kimono. Now Haku-chan, purred Hinata as she cupped the ice wielder's S. What do you live for? I live to please, and serve Naruto-sama and Hinata-sama, answered Haku, moaning quietly when her mistress's hand squeezed her left. I will be your tool, as I was Zabuza-sama's before he placed me in your care. Hinata paused in her groping of Haku's chest for a second, before grinning impishly. You are our little love tool, she purred as she resumed her mage of the twin orbs. Our little pleasure toy. She removed her hands from Haku's chest and turned the brunette, kissing her slowly and sensually. As their tongues danced against each other, Hinata removed Haku's obi, letting her kimono fall open, as Haku did the same to her. Since it was a day of relaxation, they hadn't put on bras, and so, as they pressed their bodies together, their bare s met, hardened nipples pressing together. Haku shivered as her mistress's hand climbed her spine with feather-like, teasing touches. Hinata smiled into the kiss when a needy whine escaped her love tool's throat. She was such a good toy, getting riled up like that for her mistress. She would reward her good little toy. Her left hand slid down from her perch at the top of Haku's spine, caressing her skin as it went. About halfway down, Hinata's hand began to migrate to Haku's front, still keeping contact with her skin. Haku had been forced to pull out of the kiss to breath, her head thrown back, her breath coming in short pants, while Hinata altered the column of her neck with light bites, kisses and licks. Then, Hinata's hand slipped into Haku's underwear, and a teasing finger was inserted in her burning loins. Haku moaned in delight as she felt the digit slip into her. By that time, she was so excited, so aroused, that Hinata-sama's finger was almost in. Hinata-sama's finger began to move, slowly accelerating and causing her more pleasure. Another finger was added, and Haku let out a keen moan of delight, her hips grinding into Hinata-sama's hand. She could feel Hinata-sama's hand moving to cup her as she smiled against her neck. She moved to kiss her mistress and sent one of her hands to cup one of the bountiful S of the Uzumaki bride and the other in her panties, intent on returning the pleasure she was given. Hinata moaned happily as she felt Haku's fingers enter her. Her hips moved on the welcome intruders, searching relentlessly for pleasure. She pressed herself harder against Haku, her hand groping her servants more fiercely, but it was not enough, they wouldn't get anywhere with this. So, she pulled out of the kiss and looked into Haku's yes. Enough foreplay, was all she said before removing her fingers from Haku's core and chest. Quickly, she disrobed, Haku following suit. While her love tool removed her last garments, she quickly went to one of the scrolls in the room and unfurled it. Looking over the seals, she quickly chose one and placed her hand on it. At this moment, Haku pressed herself against her back, kissing her neck and sending her fingers to renew their alts on her womanhood. Hinata sent a hand to grab the back of Haku's head and turn it so she could kiss her little love tool. With the other hand, she sent chakra to the seal and grabbed the item that popped out. She pulled out of the kiss and held her weapon up, a sensual smile on her lips. Haku stopped everything she was doing to gaze in awe and lust at the piece of orange plastic in her mistress's hands. It looked just like Naruto-sama's, only double-sided. As Hinata-sama brought it closer to her, Haku parted the lips for her, watching in fascination as it slipped inside of Hinata-sama and getting even more aroused by her moan of pleasure. Haku felt Hinata-sama turn her head and kiss her again before pulling out of her embrace and turning to face her. On the bed, now, she ordered, lust and authority dripping from her voice. Haku obeyed eagerly, wondering how Hinata-sama would take her. She placed her hands on the bed, and lifted her right leg to start crawling on the soft sheet when her mistress's voice stopped her. "No, stay like that," said Hinata as she approached Haku quickly. She took a hold of the still aloft leg and lifted it a bit more, her other hand grasping Haku's hips, before plunging her Naruto-sized joystick into Haku. She licked her lips at the delicious shock of pleasure that seared its way up her nerves. She began to pump the piece of plastic into her little pleasure toy and moaned, it felt good. Not as good as Naruto, but still very good. And she soon discovered that, once she started, she simply couldn't stop. Fiercely, she pistoned into Haku, throwing her head back and moaning out loud at the delicious sensations coursing through her. She felt a shift in Haku, and forced herself to look down. Haku had simply collapsed on the bed, and was busy moaning in the sheets and grounding her pelvis against hers. Hinata smiled devilishly, and while she still pumped the plastic into her sweet, willing slave, she sent her hand from Haku's hips to her womanhood and began to tease the little bundle of nerves that caused her to let out those delicious sounds. Haku gasped sharply before melting and mewling lewdly. She began to grind her hips in turn into Hinata-sama's hips and hand. She could feel her mind going blank, her whole body was ablaze with lust and pleasure. She loved it, she relished it. Why had she been afraid? It was heaven. Suddenly, she peeked and threw her head back, a cry of delight bursting from her lips, before she fell back down, gulping down air greedily. She felt Hinata-sama gently push her onto the bed and obeyed quietly, a smile on her lips. She collapsed face first onto the soft sheets and rolled over, exposing her front to her beloved mistress. She smiled dazedly at her goddess of love and lust, wondering what other delicious sensation she would make her experience. Hinata-sama crawled onto the bed, and pressed herself against her, eyes full of need and lust. She felt the dainty hands of her lady part her legs, and the head of the piece of plastic emulating her master's glorious sword press against her folds. She began to moan, only to be silenced by Hinata-sama's fierce kiss, as the rod slipped into her. Hinata-sama pulled out of the kiss, and looked at her straight in the eyes. "That was just the start, Haku-chan," she sensually murmured in her ear. Naruto whistled happily as he walked to his room, after setting up the new portal. He had absolutely no illusion about what his fiancée was doing to their new girl, and he couldn't wait to join in. Finally arriving at the door, he opened it, and was instantly hit by the smell of and the sounds of lustful moans coming from the bed, where Hinata was bouncing on a piece of orange plastic firmly tied to Haku's waist. Licking his lips, Naruto closed the door, reapplied the sound barrier, and shed his clothes. "Remind me, why do we have to walk?" asked Kiba. "With Naruto's portal thing, we'd have been back in Konoha 2 days ago. Would you invite strangers into your clan compound to witness clan secrets?" asked Naruto. "Heck no," answered Kiba immediately. "But that gotta mean that even your main portal room contains clan secrets, not very practical if you ask me. It's not the portal room, it's everything around it, and I know some people here are very curious. Can't take any risks." "Guess so. Ah well." Kiba returned his attention to his girl. "So Kokuo-chan, how are you doing up there?" he asked with a grin. Since Kokuo was a young civilian, she wasn't used to long treks, and certainly not to the speed at which shinobi traveled, so she was riding on his back. I'm doing good Kiba-kun," she answered, still blushing around him. She was quickly becoming more comfortable with him, but she still needed to get used to the new situation. Shimizu was busy blushing and hiding that blush in Shino's robes. The reason was that she was carried bridal style by her new lover, Master. She was a serious girl, not one for romance or such activities, so she was quite lost in this new setting. Nonetheless, she would adapt, if only that damn smooth talker would stop whispering all the naughty things he was planning to do to her. She did not need anyone to notice her arousal. Sasuke was shooting scalding glares at Sakura, thoroughly angered by her complete dismissal of him. His pride would not accept this, he would find a way to get back at her. And Ino, that bumbling fool, would be his tool. She still worshipped him, after all. Meanwhile, Sakura was discussing with Hinata and Haku all the things she'd do to Ino once they arrived. Let us say it was graphic and gave the two Uzumaki lovers quite a few ideas for fun times when their overlord wasn't there. Yakumo was riding on Anko's back, said Jonin running alongside Kakashi, both issues of the newest Ika Ika open and being read by the three persons, Anko reading on Yakumo's book with her student looking over her shoulder. And Obaswag was peacefully cruising next to them, floating above the ground as ghostly tradition dictates. It took them a total of 3 days to reach Konoha, mainly because the two civilians taken along weren't used to high speed and as such could get sick if they traveled too fast. But finally, they found themselves in front of Konoha's door, and found there a few familiar faces. Sakura-chan. Sasuke-kun. Happily sang Ino. She was dressed in weird armor that looked to be made of deep orange, semi-opaque GL or amber and had a katana strapped to her side, presumably made of the same material. Behind her, Shikamaru was his usual and unchanged lazy self, but Choji, he was now very muscled, his hair was flowing into a mane, his headband was now a regular one instead of the failed bandana, a small curl of hair popping out of the top and a mustache sitting on his upper lip. Presumably since it hid his mouth, and his shirt had been removed the moment he had spotted them. Right now he was performing what one could call a greeting through muscle flexing. Sakura liked the show. Ino happily skipped towards them, stopping in front of Sasuke with a large smile. Sasuke-kun, I have the most amazing thing to tell you. She chirped. Sasuke smirked, satisfied that his plan to get back at Sakura was going so well. He opened his mouth, but Ino beat him to the punch. I'm dumping you, and I'm taking Sakura-kun with me. Isn't that amazing? She said, her eyes shining with naive joy while she waved her arms around. And we're going to do Choji-kun too. Amazing. Would you like some cheese? She pulled out a piece of cheese from nowhere and offered it to Sasuke, with a large smile. Sasuke could only look dumbly at her, trying to understand just what the hell just happened. He had been dumped by his two fiercest fangirls. In favor of a fat. In front of everyone. Both times. It was humiliating. You little bitch. Sasuke's hand flew forward, his fist cruising at fast speed towards Ino's face, until a cheese warhammer that hit deceptively hard slammed on his head. Bad Sasuke, no cheese for you. Chided Ino, while resting her cheese hammer on her shoulder. That's when Choji decided to intervene. You tried to attack this fair and defenseless maiden. I, Choji Armstrong Akamichi, will not allow it. He roared while performing his pre-battle muscle flexes, sparkles fluttering furiously around him. Then, he slammed both his fists on the ground, fists that just so happened to be encased in iron gauntlets covered in circles and weird glyphs now that everyone was looking, and a statue of himself in a pose accentuating his muscle sprang beneath Sasuke and sent him flying. Hinata pulled a sign with 9.5, Naruto gave it a 9.8, Yakumo a 8.9 and Sakura a 10. The rest of the public, even Shikamaru, clapped while Choji bowed humbly. Alright, I'll go grab Emo boy, and then we'll give our reports. Said Anko, quickly leaving the scene and returning a few moments later with Sasuke under her arm. The boy was then woken up with a series of fast-fire slaps to the face, 26 according to Anko's combo counter. Then, with Sasuke consistently glaring at Ino and Sakura, who were too busy ogling and caressing Choji's still uncovered muscles hungrily to care, and Kurenai using her mighty bedroom eyes no jutsu on Asuma. It's super effective. The group happily made their way to the Hokage's office. Once inside, they made a detailed report, explained the 3 new faces, gave the Hokage his part of the loot and then went on their merry way, unaware of the changes coming. The man stood, strong and proud, his right foot resting on a rock, his long and spiky ponytail floating on the wind as he overlooked the valley. His mission had taken him there, and he had completed it handily. And now, one of the most powerful ninja to ever walk this earth was looking at the sunset, yet there was no serenity or relief on his features, only the grim resolve of one ready to face his destiny. For in his heart, in his very bones, the man could feel a grand change coming, one that would shake men and women throughout the world, one that would shatter walls, bruise the flesh of many and make them cry out. I feel a disturbance in the perv, muttered the man, as if 1,000 women were screaming in orgasm, only to be silenced, their mouth filled with pulsing manhoods. The age of perv is coming. He closed his eyes, remembering the old prophecy he had lived by. The child of prophecy will change this world. He can bring ruination or peace, and your influence will decide it, for you will train him. His eyes reopened. He knew. He was now faced with his destiny, his path was set, and now he would walk it. His shoulders squared, he set off. His cape, decorated with red clouds, floated in the wind, rain falling around him, drenching the scenery in a sea of tears. This land was constantly crying, making agriculture almost impossible, and its position between 3 major countries meant that it had seen more than its fair share of conflict. Yes, the land of rain was a difficult place to live, and for a long time, famines and wars had torn apart the grim, resigned folks that lived here. But they endured, and the current period of peace was allowing them to build lives. They were starting to hope, to look forward to the future, a future that could only be filled with war and death. If nothing was done, and something could be done, he could feel it, the key to their salvation laid before them, ripe for the taking. It awaited, in Konoha, in Iwa, in Kumo, in Suna, in Kiri, in Taki. Yes, with the 9, he would bring an end to war. Peace was at hand. Sasuke grumbled in annoyance as he stood in front of his front door, fishing in his pocket for his keys. Today had been particularly horrible. First, Ino dumped him in front of everyone, then he discovered half of his fangirls had found other partners, sometimes other former fangirls, and the other half was impossible to find. He had decided to train a bit to blow off some steam, but even then things had gone wrong. He had pulled a muscle and twisted his ankle, and then she mocked him all the way to home. He hated this day, and didn't see how it could go any more wrong. His answer arrived when he opened his door only to hear feminine moans, and from several girls at that, coming from his bedroom. He barreled into his room and found 6 of his fangirls, and the 2 swaggy from Team 8, in a sensual embrace. Shino was laying on his bed, a girl riding him, the 2 others pressing themselves against his sides and being fingered by the boy while taking turns kissing him. Kiba was kneeling on the ground, plowing enthusiastically into a girl from behind doggy style, while said girl was 69ing with another, and a third girl kneeling behind Kiba, had her hands roaming his chest while she kissed him. Oh come on, he screamed in frustration as everyone else ignored him. Meanwhile, she cackled gleefully at his misfortune. Tsubaki walked out of the Hokage's office rigidly. She was lost and horrified. She had just returned from a long mission, and was actually looking forward to trying to reconnect with Mizuki, her ex-boyfriend, to try and start their relationship over. They had separated 3 months ago, when she had noticed he was becoming more and more distant and had called him out on it. He had snapped at her and then it had degenerated into a fight. A few hurtful words later, she was out the door and making her way home to prepare for the long mission she planned to ask for in order to cool down. And now, she learned he had gone traitor. Right now, she was questioning every moment she had with him, she wondered just how much he had used her, or even if he had felt any hurt at their separation. She could see fellow shinobi look at her suspiciously. Most certainly they were aware of Mizuki's betrayal and were wondering if she was his accomplice. She tried to keep her face emotionless, but she feared she would snap soon. Her pace quickened as she made her way to where she knew she'd find a compassionate man, one that would understand her pain and would help her through those hard times. Soon, she was in front of Yumino Iruka's apartment, knocking on the door and fighting to contain her tears. To her surprise, it wasn't Iruka who opened the door, but a disgruntled Mitarashi Anko. Anko-san. What? Huh, oh, yeah, the traitor's girlfriend. She said, a sneer forming on her face. What? But, Mizuki and I separated before I left. Really? Hey, Ruka-kun, can you come? Iruka quickly appeared, and as Tsubaki expected, Kompion quickly colored his eyes. Tsubaki, I take it Hokage-sama told you about Mizuki. Tsubaki nodded, not trusting her voice. She felt so relieved that someone did sympathize with her, it made her hopeful for the future. She says she wasn't with the traitor since before she left. Iruka's eyebrows shot up. Mizuki had shown absolutely no sign of feeling any hurt over a separation, so it meant he had absolutely not cared. His already low opinion of his former friend plummeted even more. He opened the door a bit more and let her in, feeling Anko's gaze on him. He signaled for Tsubaki to sit on the couch and turned to his very why girlfriend, currently only clothed in a single shirt. With a sigh, he explained that Tsubaki was a good girl and didn't deserve that kind of treatment. Anko could relate to that, and resolved to treat her nicely. The couple went to see their guest and saw the girl fighting a losing battle to contain her tears. Iruka sat next to her and wrapped an arm around her shoulders, inviting her to release her pent-up emotions on his shoulder. Tsubaki did just that. Anko felt her heart go out to her, and quickly wrapped her arms around the poor girl, doing her best to give her comfort. Tsubaki spent more than 2 hours, crying in sorrow, telling them about how used she felt and the despair she felt. After she was finished venting her rage and helplessness, she lay there, cuddled between their warm bodies, soaking in their kindness. She felt Anko start to kiss her neck softly and move her hands on her body, caressing her sides lightly. Tsubaki couldn't hold back a small moan of appreciation. Iruka gave Anko an incredulous look, actually not believing what she was doing. Anko gave him a smile, and mouthed the words, "Trust me on this." Anko returned her attention to the woman between them and nuzzled her neck softly. Tsubaki-chan, we can help you forget, but, Anko placed one more sensual kiss on Tsubaki's neck, we don't want to take advantage of your sorrow. So, what do you say? Tsubaki considered her options for a moment. She had honestly considered trying to get with Iruka after her breakup with Mizuki. He was a nice guy, good looking too, and since his girlfriend looked ready to share, at least this one time, her ninja training helped her take control of her emotions, so she was able to make her decision without fear of anyone taking advantage of her. And so, it was with full control of herself that she turned to Anko, looked at her straight in the eyes, and told her, "That bastard out of my mind." Anko smiled lustfully and kissed Tsubaki straight on the lips. Iruka could only look at it in shock and try to comprehend what was happening. However, he quickly stopped trying to understand when Anko unzipped Tsubaki's flak jacket and lifted her shirt, revealing her sports bra. The fact that two women were making out in front of him had already been a severe blow to Iruka's rational thinking, so the sight of, even still in a bra, was enough to land the finishing blow. Thus, Iruka remained there, gawking, while his girlfriend stripped his soon-to-be new lover of her upper garments. Well, until Tsubaki grabbed his head and shoved it in her bosom, that is. Less gawking, more licking. She ordered before going back to kissing Anko, who by now was sneakily sending one of her hands to Tsubaki's pants. The brunette began tugging at Anko's shirt, deeming her too clothed. Pulling out of the kiss long enough to remove Iruka's shirt, thus baring her body for the world, Anko quickly dived back in, pressing her ample bosom against Tsubaki's back, before quickly unhooking the brunette's bra and sending her hand back south. Iruka took the clue and began tugging at the accursed piece of fabric blocking him from the godly sight of Tsubaki's bountiful and beautiful S. It didn't take long for the piece of fabric to come off, and soon Iruka was licking and kissing the bare flesh of the offered bosom. Tsubaki turned from the kiss long enough to see that Iruka still had his shirt on, and began tugging at it, prompting the pony-tailed man to remove it quickly before diving back into the valley of heaven. Iruka's commanding organ now being firmly located below his belt, he began to remove Tsubaki's pants, taking the occasion to caress every inch of skin he could reach. Anko's hand slipped into the woman's panties and began to caress and tease her womanhood before a single finger slowly slipped into her, a keen moan erupting from Tsubaki's throat. Iruka's mouth quickly returned to her S, teasing them mercilessly, to her delight, while his hands palmed her bottom and kneaded the pliable flesh. He quickly brought his pants-clad erection to her crotch and began to grind lustfully into her panties, Anko's fingers leaving her folds to instead part them slightly, causing Tsubaki to gasp into the kiss she shared with the pruplet. However, Anko was horny, and as fun as this was, she wanted more. She removed her lips from Tsubaki's and looked at her lustful boyfriend. "Hey Ruka-kun, I think Tsuba-chan is ready for some action, so why don't you?" Before Anko could finish her sentence, Iruka was furiously tugging at his pants to remove them. "Good boy," said Anko with a naughty smile. While Iruka was removing his pants, Anko helped Tsubaki take off her panties, thus lifting her legs in the air. When the brunette's legs came back down, her eyes widened as she looked at Iruka's package. "Be big," she stammered. Iruka blushed in emberment. "I'm only average," he muttered self-consciously, his rational mind coming back for a moment. Tsubaki only gave him an incredulous stare. "Mizuki told me he was average, and you're twice as big and twice as long." "Well, looks like Trader Chan was a liar. Believe me, Iruka's size is average, it's his technique that's astoundingly good. He's a natural," purred Anko lustfully. Once again, she parted Tsubaki's folds. "Well, Ruka-kun, get to it." Tsubaki threw her head back when Iruka entered, resting her head on Anko's shoulder, a shocked and pleasured moan surging from her throat. It felt amazing, incredible, marvelous, almost otherworldly. It was like comparing a flickering candle to a raging bonfire. The comparison would have been cruel for Mizuki if the bastard didn't deserve it. Iruka began to move once he was sure Tsubaki was ready, building a steady rhythm, brushing against places that were never reached before. Tsubaki only ever had one boyfriend, so she was now fully aware of how subpar Mizuki was. Then, she realized exactly what was happening. The nice Iruka was giving her more pleasure than that white-haired idiot ever did. A smile blossomed on her face, and she began to moan happily, locking her legs around Iruka's waist and drawing Anko into a lustful kiss. It was so naughty. Barely 3 hours ago she was thinking of dating Mizuki again, and now she was being wonderfully ed up by his former friend. Delicious. Anko on her part wanted in on the action, so she pulled out of the kiss, removed herself from behind Tsubaki, and laid her on the couch. Then, she straddled her face, and to her joy, the brunette gripped her rear and began to lick her womanhood before she could ask her to. Moaning happily, Anko used one of her hands to maul one of Tsubaki's and the other to grip the back of the couch to keep her balance. She bent forward and locked lips with Iruka, her tongue battling his for dominance as they rode Tsubaki. Anko squealed a bit when the brunette's eager tongue brushed against a particularly pleasurable spot, and through the haze of pleasure and vindication, Tsubaki decided to concentrate on that spot, causing poor Anko to melt from the pleasure. Iruka began to grunt in exertion. He couldn't take much more. He was but a man and he had two beautiful, insanely kunoichi having with him. His arousal couldn't last too long. And so, he gave in, filling Tsubaki with a last, harsh thrust that slammed into a spot that Iruka knew made the girl scream. And scream she did, sending delicious vibrations through Anko's body as she, 2, was seized by ecstasy. Anko collapsed against Iruka's heaving chest, panting in satisfaction. She could feel Tsubaki's hot breath on her womanhood, sending shivers up her back. It was delicious. But it was also far from over. Well, should we get to the bed for round 2? Asked Anko lasciviously, as she got to her feet and stretched sensually, exposing her backside to Iruka's lustful eyes and Tsubaki's playful ones. With a teasing slap on the tight before her, Tsubaki disentangled herself from Iruka and got to her feet too. Yeah, Iruka-kun's also ready. She quipped, eyeing the hardening piece of flesh. Nice. Drawled Anko as both her and Tsubaki grabbed Iruka by the arm and dragged him to the bedroom. As the door closed, Iruka managed to let out a perverted giggle in one sentence. I blame you, Uzumaki Naruto. He jubilantly said. Naruto roared in satisfaction as he filled Haku's wanting with his seed, causing a chain reaction that sent Hinata over the edge. Panting, Naruto tried to discern why he had given in so soon. They could have gone on for a few more minutes before that orgasm. Someone about to have must have talked about me. Naruto whistled happily as he trudged down the street, skipping his way to the lingerie shop. Hinata-chan had noticed that Haku-chan was seriously lacking in lingerie and had sent him to correct the situation while she explained the house rules to his new mistress. Naruto regretted a bit the fact he couldn't be present, because he was certain it involved lots of nudity and girl-on-girl action, but scrolls recovered from the ruins noted that the head mistress had to be alone when explaining the rules to the new mistresses. Besides, he knew he'd get lots of action as a reward for bringing back the load of lingerie, so he did his appointed task without complaint. He quickly reached the lingerie shop and, though the clerk was a bit reluctant, quickly bought what was needed. He chose to go for lacy, ice blue lingerie. It may seem pretty unimaginative, but he knew it'd look as on his little love tool. She'd love it. Besides, it kept to the whole cold theme she had going on, despite being very, very warm. Of course, the clerk was very surprised, and a little disturbed, that Naruto could give Haku's measurements without even looking at any note, but she gave Naruto his orders soon enough. And so, a whistling Naruto was on his way back home, quietly celebrating the week of rest the old man had given the teams. Yes, he wouldn't get tail immediately, but he'd have the rest of the week to bask in an orgy of insensuality. So, yeah, the close future looked damn good and why. However, as he was walking through the village, Naruto saw something that made him pause. A fur cloak. Now, why would it make him pause, you ask? Well, deep in his depraved and obsessed mind, a connection was made, one that would make no sense to anyone else. He connected the fur cloak with the lingerie in the bag he was carrying, and his brain followed a simplistic road. Lingerie Y. Girl in fur cloak wire. Girl in lingerie under fur cloak ultra Y. Fur lingerie bend over sweetie you're gonna squeal. His lustful mind made up, Naruto dashed at frightening speed, reaching the portal to his castle in an instant, and quickly zapping back home. He gave the bag full of lingerie to a minion and ordered the thing to put it in front of the master bedroom's door and make sure no one opened the bag. Then, he started to track Gnarl like a bloodhound, intent on claiming what he wanted. He quickly found the old minion barking orders at a group of Browns that were rebuilding another building in the village below the castle to house more root agents. Gnarl, he exclaimed, his voice powerful and full of authority. Do we have portals to regions with furry creatures? Most certainly, sire. They were established a long time ago for better access to some resources. Then why didn't my ancestors use them to evacuate? Asked Naruto, curiosity temporarily pushing aside his lust for furry lingerie. An unexpected turn of event, my lord. Some Kumo shinobi managed to sneak in and sabotage the tower heart. It took us ages to gather the parts and rebuild it, and even longer to reactivate it. But how did they sneak in? Asked Naruto in astonishment. Gnarl looked uncomfortable. They put on lingerie and seduced a few Uzumaki. Naruto looked at Gnarl with a blank face for a few moments, before a cheery smile appeared on his face. Alright, I'll have to work on a seal to put on every girl from an enemy village that tries to sleep with an Uzumaki. It'll force them to tell the truth when asked a question and stop them from harming the Uzumaki clan in any way. And I'll probably throw in a bit to make them more sensitive during. A good idea, my lord. Yeah, well, anyway, those portals are active. Yes, sir. Good. I'll take a bunch of minions and go hunting. And so, Naruto darted toward the minion dens, intent on gathering a force of minions to slaughter lots of cute and fluffy animals in the name of lust. After Gnarl managed to catch up to Naruto and explained to him what to expect at the portal he had chosen, and thus pushed him to take the right equipment, the Overlord was standing at the portal room, calmly recounting everything Gnarl had told him. The climate was very cold apparently, so he had added some fur padding to his armor, and given some fur vests to his minions. There was also a village there that apparently was friendly with the previous overlords, so it might be worth looking there. The keep where the portal was had probably fallen to the elements sadly. A quick check with Giblet had allowed him to pack one keep summoning stone to replace the fallen one and 4 outpost summoning stone just in case. His tachi was secured to his belt, his pouch filled with scrolls containing supplies, and the seals on his belt stuffed full of equipment. Gnarl had finally found the scrolls explaining how to use some of the built-in seals in the gauntlet, and he had practiced a bit with them. This would be the perfect occasion to try those out. When he finally stepped on the portal, he did so as a conqueror. The crowd of minion gathered behind him, babbling stupidly, waving around their weapons, still mostly crude stuff. Once Naruto was certain all his vanguard was in place, he sent chakra to the portal, activating it and sending him to his destination. The first thing he noticed was the bitter cold, the second was the screams and the sounds of stone being broken. His gaze swept the room and stopped on 2 men, clad in furs and wielding stone hammers. They had been pummeling at a statue of an overlord, but were now looking at the group in surprise. They began to scream hatefully at Naruto in a tongue he knew not. One of them charged at him, his hammer raised high, his face a mask of fury. Naruto cared not. These men had desecrated a statue of his ancestor, they would pay. With a hand gesture, Naruto instructed the rowdy minions into staying where they were before taking 4 steps forward. The man was almost upon him, already aiming a blow at Naruto's helmet, but the boy simply unsheathed his tachi with his right hand, sweeping it faster than the untrained human eye could follow, cleaving the man in half at the waist. He rose his left hand and, with a pulse of chakra to the seals inside the gauntlet, activated one of the attacks. Shinra Tensei resonated in his mind as the 2 halves of the fool that tried to attack him flew back. The second man darted from the room, screaming in panic. Naruto didn't care. He would exterminate them all for daring to attack the statue of an overlord. So, with cold fury, Naruto stalked out of the room, a quick flick of his wrist calling the minions back to him. He walked out of the portal room and found a group of warriors, barely 10 of them, forming up a hasty defense. He sneered as he walked closer to them, his cape bellowing in the cold wind that raced through the old fort. One of them, the leader it seemed, stepped forward and pointed at Naruto, his primitive spear, apparently tipped with fangs tied together, gripped tightly in his other hand. You know, welcome here, demon. Go back before dead. Oh, so you want to talk, do you? Ground out Naruto. You made a mistake, destroying my ancestor's statue. You know, demon, the man realized. You human can die. He began speaking to his men, a smile on his face. He probably relayed that discovery, because their grip on their weapons tightened, and confident smiles came to their faces. Naruto didn't stop walking. Instead, he began to radiate his chakra and killing intent, robbing these men of all courage. You think you can beat me? You think you can kill me? I am Uzumaki Naruto, the Overlord, and I have come for your lives. He roared, reactivating the voice-modifying seal in his mempo. The warriors quivered, 3 dropped the weapons and tried to run, only to die with a kunai in their necks. Naruto disappeared from view, and reappeared a heartbeat later, his sword shearing through the neck of the leader. The minions overwhelmed the rest, clubbing them to death with extreme brutality. It was not enough. Naruto walked forward, only to arrive at the courtyard of the keep. On the other side, he could see the open door, showing a fight between the tribe living in this keep and another tribe. His musings were broken when he felt a surge of chakra. He turned to look at the source, and saw a shaman, presumably, dressed much like the others but with added bones and baubles. Suddenly, searing pain surged through Naruto as he felt like the shaman's energy was trying to pull something out of him. With a beastly cry, Naruto saw the world go black. Naruto opened his eyes violently, looking around to assess his situation. He was in a strange place, with corridors lavishly decorated, an erotic style permeating the place. The walls were covered in deep red velvet, gold inlays showing here and there, lascivious marble statues and decadent paintings lining the walls. He noted with some curiosity and discomfort that a serious amount of the decorations featuring women had Hinata, Haku or beautiful women he had seen before as their focus, with Hinata and Haku holding the top spot. He began walking forward, a frown on his face, but the deeper into this unknown place he walked, the more depraved and pleasing the decoration got. One of the pillars was shaped like Hinata, screaming in pleasure, her legs wrapped around the waist of himself, and her arms drawn up, completing the pillar. The pillar on the other side of the corridor showed Haku, her arms held above her with chains, being claimed from behind by a Naruto who played with her s. The fact that the pillar was architecturally impossible made the Overlord question the exact place he was in. He continued however because, no matter how pleasing the sight of all this porn about his mates was, his life might very well be in danger. He arrived at a large, very large room. The roof of the room was high and vaulted, the keystone shaped to look like an Uzumaki clan symbol. The vaults themselves were shaped like Hinata, her face one of ecstasy, her back arched in delight, her s pushed out, her beautiful thighs squeezed, one slightly above the other, delightful. She looked exactly like she did when Naruto got her off with his fingers. Naruto liked this room very much. However, the second part of the room was a bit ominous. Starting at the two pillars farther from the door, a long, dark red curtain fell from the ceiling to the floor, slightly parted in the middle and revealing a golden door of enormous proportions. Each of the shining bars was as large as the statues from the corridors, glistening with eldritch energies that moved in convoluted ways, tracing what Naruto recognized as a seal of incredible power. "I greet thee, host of mine," came a rumbling voice from beyond the bars. "Your hospitality is greater than your predecessors. The cell you have procured me certainly is more comfortable. But didn't we meet already earlier last year?" noted Naruto in confusion. "No, what you faced was but an illusion, a glamour I used to hide myself, bid my time, and decide if you were worthy of my attention. I have deemed you so. I see. Then I formally greet you, Otsutsuki Kurama-sama," said Naruto respectfully, now guessing where he was. "I am pleased to learn your stay here has been tolerable." "Otsutsuki, you would call me by that name?" came the fox's surprised and pleased inquiry. "You surprise me, my jailer. Where have you learned this name?" he asked as the darkness lifted from his side of the bars, revealing him in all his nine-tailed glory, sitting comfortably on a large and fluffy cushion. "Gnarl was pretty exhaustive in teaching me the origins of my clan." "Ah, Gnarl, little imp he is, but fiercely loyal. I should have expected that a child of Nemu would realize my position. Now, my jailer, since you know who I am, what will you do?" "Well, first I'd like to have confirmation you won't turn Konoha into a crater. I kind of intend to have my yet-to-be-born babies live there." "Well, part-time. But still, that would be difficult. This village will aim to rob me of freedom and free will, to jail me in yet another cell and deny me all comfort, even that of my own thoughts. And if I find a way to change that..." The fox seemed to ponder the situation for a few moments, eyeing Naruto calculatingly. "You have pleased me, by calling me by my father's name. I shall hear your offer. I can say I managed to find and remove a seal on you that was clouding your thoughts. Since you are basically nature's wrath incarnate, and thus pure chakra, it'd be credible to think the seal would have remained on you, even after being trapped here. Go on. Then I say that, out of gratitude, you accepted to not attack Konoha again, or even defend it if you want. Then, I could devise a seal that would act like an anchor point for your being and place it in Whirlpool. Your essence would be placed inside, but you'd be able to leave at any moment and do your stuff. Kinda like a cage, only wide open. That is impossible, said a clearly gobsmacked. That would be in complete violation of every laws of Fuinjutsu ever established. Impossible, I say. Impossible means slightly longer than usual in the Uzumaki dictionary, answered Naruto in full seriousness. Kurama threw his head back and let out a series of howls somewhere between a hurricane and a rockslide. It took Naruto a full second to realize the fox was laughing his tails off. You amuse me greatly, Uzumaki Naruto. I feel your honesty, so I shall grant you the boon of my power. Do stop the annoyance prodding at our gate though. Such meddling causes my patience to run thin. Naruto's eyes snapped open and a new energy coursed through him. He howled an earth-shattering cry, and shattered the energy wrapped around him. Out of instinct, he channeled and molded the new energy, the new and powerful chakra flowing through him, and morphed it into a giant fox head. With a dash, he was near the shaman. With a sweep of his arm, the old fool was cut in two by the fox's maw. His minions were already swarming the defenders, beating them to death. For some reason, the opposing tribes seemed invigorated by his presence and that of the minions, fighting with furious abandon and taking down the heathen that dared defile his precious ancestor's statue in conjunction with the minions. As he came closer to the front line, he understood why. For the overlord, screamed a cute little thing. She was about 16, wearing blue clothes lined with fur like her tribe's mates, tanned like everyone here, her hair gathered in a tress, with two locks coming from behind her ears and brought along her face, secured to her bangs by a little piece of jewelry. Despite the baggy clothes, Naruto could tell she had a nice figure. All in all, his thoughts could be summarized as, I'd tap that. It was at this moment that a horde of minions surged from the keep, arms raised in gleeful malevolence. It wasn't all that hard to distinguish the good guys, from his point of view, from the others. The blue guys, as Naruto inventively dubbed them, were the only ones to wear colored clothes, the others had just furs. Well, now the enemy also had colored clothes, but in lots of pretty shades of red. Naruto decided to step toward his welcoming committee while his minions took care of the opposition. Of course, he butchered the 4 idiots that tried to attack him on the way, but those are not important. The blue tribe had apparently beaten their opponents at the front gate, because they were now charging through the gate to help his minions. Good boys, he'd have to get them biscuits or something. The girl, however, stopped right in front of him and fell to her knees, bowing to him until her forehead rested on the snow. She had an accent when she talked, but it was kinda nice. It made Naruto wonder if she also had the accent when giving blowjobs. Master, I welcome you in your domain. Please forgive this little insurrection. The Urkoas won't be causing problems anymore. I'm guessing those Urkoas are the bunch of savages that were sullying my keep. He asked nonchalantly, opting to deactivate the voice-modifying seal. Why yes, master. I am sorry. I only recently took control of the tribe. I couldn't lead the reclamation strike earlier. The elders opposed me. I'll face any punishment you deem fitting, Lord. Good girl. But nope, you're not gonna be punished. Those elders, on the other hand, later. A quick look behind informed him that the shouts he was hearing were of victory. Okay. Get up. Your name. Oh, I am so sorry, my lord. I am Katara. Nice name. He noted how she blushed and smiled hopefully. He could feel through the perv how bad she wanted it. Good girl. Alright, you're going to get your tribesmen and tell them to gather the prisoners outside, along with all the loot. Food, fur, whatever. At once, my lord. She darted inside and began barking orders. She had a good voice, It'd be fun to make her scream. Bah, later. For now, he needed to have a better grasp of the situation. And possibly start using more minion types, just browns was kind of wasteful. Ah, well, for now, getting a better feel of the land. Taking a look around, he saw that the land was mostly flat plains covered in snow with the occasional pine cove, which meant nothing of big interest there, but maybe the ground held some interesting things. The blue guys started filling out, carrying stuff and escorting prisoners, most of them women and children. The loot wasn't all that interesting, mostly furs, meat, some fat and wood, nothing much by his standards, really. The blue dudes were pretty excited though. Oh, well. Oh, what's that? Amber. Huh, nice find. That could be fashioned into pretty jewelry for his lovers. Bonus points. Once everything was out, he sent a builder minion to place the new keep stone where the old one was, that would summon the keep from Uzu and replace the old one, that one would be repaired. Ah, Lil, Kata-chan was coming back to her master. Everything is here, Lord. Do you wish to inspect the prisoners and the seized goods? Loot. Katara-chan, loot. Seized goods make it sound like we didn't just pillage their village and destroy their lives, it takes a large part of the fun out of it. He cheerfully corrected her. She looked pretty astonished, but a few of her warriors were laughing at the line. Good boys, he really needed to get them some biscuits. Naruto walked over to the loot pile and took a look at the different goods, trying to look interested. However, he quickly became actually interested by the wood. There was some quality wood, and of a nice color, sadly the quantity wasn't really high. He signaled Katara over. This wood, is there more of it? I like the color and it looks like a quality piece. Naruto noted that she looked pretty surprised by the question, and a bit uncertain of how to answer. Well, yes, we have more of it. Oh, our tribe holds the biggest forest of the region as you know, and... No, I don't know. My clan got almost wiped out by powerful enemies about 30 years ago. I reclaimed my homeland a few months ago. You're the first of our outposts I contacted. Naruto carefully hid the main reason he had for coming here. Yeah, he had come here because they were the most worthy, not because he needed furry undies to highlight his girl's inness. The tribe looked pretty shaken and horrified, some even uncertain. Wouldn't do for them to question the intelligence of being loyal. Of course our enemies lost almost their entire attack force and several of their leaders. Only 2 of our surviving enemies have recovered from the price we made them pay, and only because they are the largest. And if they try to finish the job, it'll end badly. He finished with a bloodthirsty smile, Kurama helpfully providing special effects via a cloak of blood-red chakra bubbling into place. The blue dudes looked suitably impressed, and the prisoners properly scared shitless. Very good. The cloak receded, and Naruto returned to the matter at hand. So, you have more of that wood, that's good. Then you can do whatever you want with the looted wood. I'll take some of the fur though, and all of the amber. You can have the rest. They looked particularly happy to hear that, but, to be fair, that was a shitload of meat. Whatever. Naruto looked behind him, and saw that the transfer was complete. A brand new keep was standing there, specially adapted to face polar conditions. Good minions, he'd get them meatballs. A brown scampered up to him, his stupid, glowing eyes begging for approval. Master, keep ready. Lots Omenians to guard. Yes. Blues and reds and browns, and some greens. Good. You've done well. I really have to get you some meatballs. Yay. Meatballs from Damasta. The little imp ran back in, happily screaming. It didn't take long for the whole keep to resonate from the happy, idiotic cries of the minions. Naruto turned back to Katara. Alright, take me back to your village, I'll set up an outpost there, it'll make things simpler. Katara nodded respectfully, and barked orders to her men. The caravan of warriors, goods and prisoners began to organize itself. Hinata was laying sensually on the bed, humming in appreciation as her lovely love tool softly lapped at her folds. Haku had been very serious about studying the house rules, and she was a very obedient student. Good girl. Haku began to kiss her way up Hinata's body, sending her fingers to tend to Hinata's womanhood, and stopped at her S, kissing and licking the orbs. Hinata moaned in pleasure and caressed Haku's head softly. Good girl. Now, let's see if you remember everything. Who are your masters? Hinata-sama and Naruto-sama. Dutifully answered Haku before going back to ling the nipple of Hinata's left. Good. What happens if you're a bad girl? I get no and a punishment. A not fun punishment. She answered obediently, before apparently deciding that she wanted more of Hinata's essence and made her way down her body to lap at her folds again. Hinata shuddered in pleasure at the feeling of the tongue exploring her. And what happens if you're a good girl? She asked breathlessly. I get lots of wonderful with my beloved masters, I keep my position as a mistress and, in time, I'll be blessed with one of Naruto-sama's children. Haku's voice was full of eagerness, lust and fanatical devotion. Hinata had done her job well. Good girl. Now make me come, and we'll pick you some, such an enthusiastic pet. Moaned Hinata as Haku didn't even let her finish her sentence before obeying the order. With the relentless teasing she had enjoyed, Hinata was close to the edge, and it didn't take long for her to peek, her back arching off the bed. Haku slid up Hinata's body, pressing her curves against Hinata's in a sensual display that, doubtlessly, would have caused Naruto to summon an army of clones and ravish them both into sweet, ally blissful oblivion. She kissed her mistress lovingly yet pianately, willing the kiss to carry all the love, devotion and gratitude she held for those that gave her so much love. Hinata answered the kiss gently, accepting her love tool's affection, and giving back some love as well. When they finally came up for air, Hinata gave a smile to Haku. Come on, we have to get you your equipment. Haku's eyes widened in wonderment, amusing Hinata. What? You are part of Naruto-kun's harem, you are to help him in battle, and that means you need equipment. Now get up, she softly urged her. After dressing in loose clothing and grabbing a bag, Hinata led Haku through the corridors to where Giblet's lair was. It was, as usual, warm and comfortable. Haku was looking in awe at the many armor suits displayed, trying to find one that caught her fancy. Her eyes fell on a white heavy armor suit. It looked a lot like Naruto's suit, but instead of cloth, armored flaps fell from the belt. The kabuto was adorned with jagged, ice-like spikes, the Uzumaki crest prominent on the front. She timidly pointed at it, hoping her mistress would allow her to have it. Hinata looked at Haku's choice and nodded her head in appreciation. Good choice Haku-chan, you look good in it. Though, it might need some refitting. Come on, try it on, we'll see what needs to be changed. Haku eagerly put on the armor and found it was a bit too large in the chest area, apparently its previous owner was on the huge side of busty. Well, Giblet would change that once he took the measurements. Haku removed the armor and gave it to Giblet to modify, before returning to Hinata's side. Good, now we only have to find you some kimono, follow me Haku-chan, it's over there. Said Hinata, going to the room. Haku was certain beyond certainty that she had made the good choice when submitting to her handsome overlord. Naruto was mildly impressed when they arrived at the Blue Dude's village. There were wood buildings, and not just small snow houses. Not bad. The Browns running towards him with blacksmith hammers were a surprise though. They started to dance around him with the now familiar chant of, Masta, but Naruto noticed one coming far slower. It looked smarter and actually had a graying skin. Masta, welcome. Me Crooker. Been forgin for long time. Happy to see ya Masta. Hey, you sound smarter than the other Browns, and your skin's turning gray, like Gnarl. That be age. Me old. 3 centuries said Overlord Soburo. So, you minions get smarter with age, Good to know. Now, follow me. Katara. I need a private setting to talk with Crooker. Certainly my lord. Devotedly said the girl. Please follow me, I will lead you to the chief hut. Katara's devotion was most pleasing. Naruto mused that she deserved a reward and vowed to do her before leaving, while she ate his beloved Hinata out. She wouldn't be a mistress though. No, he needed his mistresses full time. But she'd be a fun lay from time to time. Well, if Hina-chan allowed it. Though, knowing her perviness, she would. He and Crooker followed Katara through the reasonably sized village to the large wooden building standing in the middle of it. She opened the door and bowed deeply as she let them through. Thankfully, the hall was warm, mainly due to the gigantic bonfire in the middle. Katara closed the door after them, allowing them to talk. All right, situation report, demanded Naruto. This Ulic tribe, good warriors, good equipment thanks to Smith minions. 3 enemies, Parta's tribe to north, Eric tribe to east, and Aragnik, seal god. A. Seal god. Like, giant, white, fluffy seal. Yes, but aggressive, and man-eating. 8 Parta's king. Daughter took over. Is she hot? Parta's Esteth very beautiful say men, but cold and cruel. Nothing a good can't fix. Okay, thanks for the info. He nodded to Crooker before turning to the door and talking loudly. Katara, get that cute of yours in here. Said girl stepped in with a bright blush, and an even brighter smile. Yes my lord, where's that big seal thingy playing at being a god? I want a fur coat. He said, before mentally adding, among others. Katara seemed to falter for a second, a flash of fear ping on her face, before she steeled herself with conviction. Aragnak's territory separates us from the Partas, though they prove to be a threat from time to time. The damn seal is northeast of here. Do you want my warriors to accompany you? Yeah, along with some minions I guess, gonna need to carry the thing. Katara seemed surprised that he'd only see them as help for carrying the beast, before remembering he was the overlord. That's what they did. Dutifully, she left to inform the tribe. Hopefully, if she was a good servant, he would reward her. A shiver went down her spine, and it had nothing to do with the cold. Squeaky was a good minion, loyal and not too bright. He was good at one thing in particular, guarding. So, he was at the perfect post, guarding that portal, and making sure nothing bad happened. He wasn't sure what he'd do if something bad happened, probably bash at it until it was set right. Lost in his deep thoughts as he was understandably surprised, when the portal roared to life, discharging onto its platform 2 armored figures. Now, where has Naruto dearest disappeared to?